The medical clinic's fluorescent lights flickered as Adriana Vale stepped through the door, unaware that a nurse's simple mistake was about to bind her to the most dangerous man in New York. 6 weeks later, she stared at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands, her entire world shattering. The father wasn't some college boyfriend or casual fling. It was Leonardo Moretti, heir to a criminal empire that had ruled Manhattan's underworld for 3 generations. One clerical error, one wrong name called in a waiting room. And now, 2 rival mafia families were about to go to war over the child growing inside her. If you're ready to discover how a medical mistake became the most dangerous love story in New York, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The November rain hammered against the tall windows of Premier Reproductive Health, one of Manhattan's most exclusive fertility clinics, where discretion cost as much as the procedures themselves. Adriana Vale sat in the plush waiting room, her leather portfolio balanced on her lap, checking her phone for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. 23 years old, newly graduated with her veterinary degree, and already running late for a meeting with potential investors for her dream clinic. This appointment was supposed to be quick, just the annual physical her insurance required. She glanced around the waiting room. Everything whispered wealth and privacy. Marble floors, abstract art that probably cost more than her student loans, and frosted glass that prevented anyone from seeing in or out. The other women waiting kept their eyes down, some hiding behind designer sunglasses despite being indoors. This wasn't the kind of place where people made small talk. Adriana? She looked up at the nurse standing in the doorway, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a tight smile that didn't quite reach them. "That's me," Adriana said, gathering her things. The nurse glanced down at her tablet, then back up. "Right this way." Adriana followed her down a corridor lined with more frosted glass, past doors that remained firmly closed, past the muffled sounds of medical equipment and hushed conversations. The nurse's shoes clicked against the marble with rhythmic precision. "First time here?" the nurse asked without looking back. "Yes. My primary care doctor referred me, said you had the best equipment for routine screenings." "We do," the nurse replied, her tone flat. "Very thorough, very private." They stopped at examination room 7. The nurse held the door open, gesturing Adriana inside. "Change into the gown. Dr. Chen will be with you shortly. We'll need you to review and sign the consent forms on the tablet." Adriana stepped into the room, which looked like any other medical examination room she'd been in, except everything was newer, more expensive, more sterile. The nurse closed the door with a soft click. She changed into the gown, feeling the familiar vulnerability that came with paper-thin medical clothing, and settled onto the examination table. The tablet on the side table showed a consent form. She scrolled through it, standard medical language about procedures, privacy, potential risks. She'd signed a dozen forms like this before. Her finger hovered over the signature box, then tapped. Done. Dr. Chen entered 15 minutes later, a woman in her 50s with sharp features and an efficient manner. She barely looked at Adriana before checking the tablet. "Everything looks standard here," Dr. Chen said. "We'll proceed as planned. Any questions?" "No, I don't think so. This is just a routine physical, right?" Dr. Chen's eyes flickered with something. Confusion, maybe? But it passed so quickly, Adriana thought she'd imagined it. "Yes, routine. This won't take long." But the examination felt anything but routine. There were additional tests, procedures Adriana didn't recognize, questions that seemed oddly specific about her medical history, her family background, her health habits. When she asked about it, Dr. Chen offered vague explanations about comprehensive screening and advanced diagnostics. By the time Adriana left the clinic 90 minutes later, she felt vaguely unsettled, though she couldn't articulate why. She pushed the feeling aside, hailed a cab, and rushed to her investor meeting, her mind already shifting to business plans and revenue projections. The unease faded over the following weeks as she threw herself into work, into planning, into the beautiful chaos of building something from nothing. 6 weeks later, everything changed. Adriana stood in her tiny Brooklyn apartment bathroom, staring at the pregnancy test resting on the edge of the sink. 2 pink lines. Unmistakable. Impossible. Her hand shook as she picked it up, brought it closer to her face, as if proximity would somehow change the result. It didn't. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She'd taken 3 tests, all positive, and she hadn't slept with anyone in over 8 months. a dry spell she'd joked about with her best friend just last week, over wine and takeout. The bathroom walls seemed to close in. Her breathing came faster, shallower. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be happening. She was careful, always careful. And besides, there was no one to be careful with. No boyfriend, no casual hookup, no drunken mistake at a party. Nothing. Her phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. Her father. She let it go to voicemail. Victor Vale didn't call unless it was important, and right now she couldn't handle important. She could barely handle standing upright. The phone buzzed again immediately. Then again. Her father never called 3 times in a row unless something was catastrophically wrong. With trembling fingers, she answered, "Dad, I can't really—" "Where are you?" His voice was tight, controlled in that dangerous way that meant he was barely containing fury. "Home." "Why? What's—" "Stay there. Don't leave. Don't talk to anyone. I'm coming over." The line went dead. Adriana stared at the phone, her confusion now laced with cold dread. Her father was many things, protective, controlling, deeply involved in business ventures he never fully explained, but he didn't panic. Ever. The carefully measured anger in his voice was somehow worse than shouting. 20 minutes later, her apartment door opened. She hadn't heard a knock. Her father had a key, had insisted on it when she'd moved to Brooklyn 2 years ago, despite her protests about independence and privacy. Victor Vale entered like a storm system, filling the small space with his presence. He was 56, silver-haired, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than Adriana's monthly rent. Behind him came 2 men she'd never seen before. Large, silent, wearing the kind of blank expressions that suggested they were paid not to have opinions. "Dad, what the hell?" "Sit down," he said. It wasn't a request. Adriana sat on her threadbare couch, suddenly very aware of how small her apartment was, how thin the walls were, how utterly unprepared she was for whatever was about to happen. Victor dismissed the 2 men with a gesture. They stepped outside, taking positions in the hallway. Then he turned to his daughter, and for the first time in her life, Adriana saw something in his eyes that terrified her more than his anger ever had. Fear. "Tell me about the clinic," he said quietly. "The fertility clinic you went to 6 weeks ago." The room tilted. "How did you—" "Tell me." She swallowed hard. "It was just a routine physical. My insurance required it for the new coverage. Dr. Morrison referred me. Said they had the best equipment. It felt weird, actually. They did extra tests, asked strange questions. I thought it was just because they were thorough." "What name did you give them?" "What?" "My name." "Adriana Vale, why?" Victor's jaw clenched. He pulled out his phone, tapped something, then showed her a photograph. "Do you recognize this woman?" Adriana stared at the image. The woman was roughly her age, with similar features, dark hair, olive skin, similar build. "No. Who is she?" "Her name is Adriana Castellano. She's the daughter of Marco Castellano, who runs one of the largest construction and shipping operations in the Northeast." He paused, and his next words came out like broken glass. "And she was scheduled for a fertility procedure at that clinic on the same day as your appointment. A procedure involving genetic material from a very specific donor." The pieces began to fit together in Adriana's mind, forming a picture so horrifying she wanted to reject it entirely. "No, Dad, no, that's not—" "The clinic made a mistake," Victor said, his voice deadly calm now. "They called the wrong Adriana. And you signed the consent forms without reading them carefully." "I did read them. They were standard medical—" "They weren't standard, sweetheart. They were consent for artificial insemination." The world stopped. Adriana couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what she was hearing. It was too absurd, too impossible, too much like a nightmare that should end when she woke up. "That's not possible," she finally managed. "That's not— People don't just make those kinds of mistakes. They do when they're running a high-volume operation serving clients who value anonymity over attention to detail." Victor sat down beside her, his movements careful, controlled. "The Castellano family paid for the procedure in advance. Multiple procedures, actually, over several months. The donor was selected specifically to produce an heir with certain genetic traits. Strong bloodlines. Good health. Intelligence." "Who?" Adriana whispered, though part of her already knew the answer would change everything. Victor's expression hardened. "Leonardo Moretti." The name hung in the air like a death sentence. Everyone in New York knew the Moretti name, even if they pretended not to. Old money built on new crimes. Real estate empires constructed on foundations of blood and silence. Political connections that went all the way to the top, greased by money that never appeared on official records. Leonardo Moretti was the heir to all of it. 31 years old, brilliant, ruthless, and untouchable. The tabloids called him the Prince of Manhattan, though never to his face. His photograph appeared in society pages at charity galas and art openings, always in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, always with a different beautiful woman on his arm, always with those cold, dark eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they saw. "I'm pregnant with Leonardo Moretti's child," Adriana said slowly, testing the words, seeing if they sounded any less insane when spoken aloud. They didn't. "Yes." "Because of a clerical error." "Yes." "And the Castellano family, they know?" "Not yet. But they will." The clinic is scrambling to contain the situation, but this kind of mistake doesn't stay buried. Too many people involved. Too much money. Too much at stake. Victor took her hand, his grip firm. "The Moretti family will find out within 48 hours, maybe sooner." "What happens then?" Her father's silence was answer enough. 36 hours later, Adriana's phone rang at 2 in the morning. She was already awake, had been for hours, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, running through increasingly desperate scenarios. None of them ended well. The number was blocked. "Hello? Miss Vale?" The voice was male, smooth, with the kind of educated accent that suggested expensive private schools and European boarding schools. "My name is Richard Chen. I represent the Moretti family's legal interests. We need to meet." "It's 2 in the morning." "Yes, I'm aware of the time. There's a car outside your building. Please come down. Bring your father if you'd like. This conversation needs to happen now, before the situation becomes exponentially more complicated." "And if I refuse?" "Then we have this conversation in a much less comfortable setting and with far less courtesy." The threat was delivered politely, almost apologetically. "I'm not the enemy here, Miss Vale. I'm trying to help you navigate an impossible situation with minimal damage to everyone involved. Please, come down." The line went dead. Adriana, dressed in jeans and a sweater, texted her father and went downstairs. The November cold hit her like a physical blow. A black sedan idled at the curb, its windows tinted dark. The back door opened. Richard Chen was younger than his voice suggested, maybe 40, Asian American, wearing a suit that probably cost $5,000. He gestured to the seat beside him. "Miss Vale, thank you for coming down. Your father?" "On his way." "Good. We'll wait." He poured tea from a thermos into a small cup, offered it to her. She shook her head. "Suit yourself. This is going to be a difficult conversation, so I'll be direct. The Moretti family is aware of the situation. They've known for approximately 8 hours. Mr. Moretti himself was informed 6 hours ago. He's currently deciding how to proceed." "Deciding?" Adriana's voice came out sharper than intended. "What is there to decide? This wasn't my choice. I didn't consent to this. The clinic made a mistake that's violated my body, my autonomy, my entire life. I understand your anger. Do you? Do you really?" She felt something hot and dangerous rising in her chest. "I'm pregnant with a stranger's child because someone couldn't be bothered to check a name twice. And now you're here in the middle of the night talking about what the Moretti family is deciding, as if I'm just some inconvenient problem to be managed. You're not a problem, Miss Vale. You're the mother of the Moretti heir." The words landed like a physical blow. "That child you're carrying," Chen continued quietly, "represents the future of one of the most powerful families in America. Regardless of how the pregnancy occurred, that fact remains unchanged. The Moretti family takes legacy very seriously. They won't simply let this situation disappear." Another car pulled up. Victor Vale stepped out, flanked by the same 2 silent men from Adriana's apartment. He slid into the back seat, his presence immediately changing the dynamic. "Chen," he said flatly, "still playing messenger boy for the Morettis?" "Victor, always a pleasure." Chen's smile was thin. "We were just discussing the current situation." "There's nothing to discuss. Your client made a deposit at a fertility clinic. The clinic fucked up. My daughter is the victim here. She owes the Morettis nothing." "Legally, that's debatable. The consent forms she signed were obtained under false pretenses," Victor cut in. "Any halfway decent lawyer will argue fraud, medical malpractice, violation of informed consent. The Morettis don't have a legal leg to stand on here. Perhaps not legally, Chen agreed, but we both know this situation exists far outside the boundaries of law. The clinic is owned by a subsidiary of a holding company that traces back to interests friendly to both our families. If this goes public, if there's litigation, if lawyers start digging into the clinic's client records, he let the implication hang. Many powerful people use that facility for very private matters. They won't appreciate the attention. Is that a threat? It's an observation. Chen turned back to Adriana. Miss Vale, I understand this isn't your fault, but you're now carrying something very valuable to the Moretti family. They're prepared to be generous, extremely generous. Medical care, financial support, a trust fund that would set you up for life. All they ask is involvement in the child's life. Reasonable access, a role in major decisions. No, Adriana said. Both men looked at her. No, she repeated, stronger now. This is my body, my life, my choice. I didn't ask for this. And I'm not going to spend the next 18 years negotiating custody arrangements with a criminal family because someone else made a mistake. What are you saying? Chen asked carefully. I'm saying I'm going to terminate the pregnancy. The silence in the car was absolute. Victor's hand found hers, squeezed once. Support, permission, whatever she needed. Chen's expression remained carefully neutral. I would strongly advise against that course of action. Because the Moretti family won't allow it. They don't get a say. Miss Vale, Adriana, please listen carefully. Chen leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to find a middle path here. But if you terminate that pregnancy, there will be consequences, severe consequences. The Morettis don't make idle threats, and they don't accept loss gracefully. That child represents the continuation of their bloodline, their legacy. If you take that away... He didn't finish the sentence. So what? Adriana's voice shook with fury. They'll kill me? Kill my father? Burn down my business before I can even start it? Is that how this works? It doesn't have to work that way at all, Chen said. That's why I'm here. That's why we're having this conversation in a car instead of in a much worse place. Mr. Moretti is willing to be reasonable, but he needs to meet with you, speak with you directly. Human being to human being, not through lawyers and intermediaries. No. Adriana, her father started. No, Dad, I'm not meeting with him. I'm not negotiating. I'm not playing this game. She reached for the door handle. I'm going back inside, and tomorrow I'm going to find a doctor who can help me end this nightmare. Wait. Chen's voice carried a note of desperation now. One meeting, that's all I'm asking. One conversation. If, after speaking with Mr. Moretti, you still want to proceed with termination, I'll personally ensure you receive the best medical care available. No questions asked, no interference, but give him the courtesy of one conversation. Please. Adriana looked at her father. Victor's expression was unreadable, but his slight nod told her everything she needed to know. This was a fight they couldn't win through refusal. The Morettis had too much power, too many resources, too many ways to make life unbearable. Meeting with Leonardo Moretti once was a tactical concession, not surrender. One meeting, she finally said, somewhere public, with my father present. And if I don't like what I hear, we're done. No more negotiations, no more conversations, no more midnight visits. Agreed, Chen said immediately. Tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock, the Moretti estate in Westchester. Mr. Moretti believes this conversation deserves privacy, but you're welcome to bring your father and any security you feel necessary. Not the estate, somewhere neutral. Chen hesitated, then nodded. There's a restaurant in Midtown, Il Sol. The entire place will be reserved for your meeting, private but public enough to satisfy your concerns about safety. Fine. Thank you, Miss Vale. You're making the right choice. She got out of the car without responding, her father following. They watched the sedan pull away into the pre-dawn darkness. You okay? Victor asked quietly. No, Adriana said, but I will be. Il Sole occupied the ground floor of a discreet building on East 52nd Street, the kind of restaurant that didn't need a sign because everyone who needed to know about it already did. Adriana arrived with her father at exactly 7 o'clock, wearing a simple black dress and the diamond studs her mother had given her before she died, armor disguised as jewelry. The restaurant was empty except for 3 men seated at a corner table. Leonardo Moretti was easy to identify, even though Adriana had only seen him in photographs. He stood as they approached, tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair just beginning to show gray at the temples. He wore a navy suit that had definitely been custom made, and his face was all sharp angles and aristocratic features. But it was his eyes that struck her. They were dark, intelligent, and completely unreadable. The other two men were clearly security, large, alert, positioned to have clear sightlines to all entrances. "Miss Vale," Leonardo said, his voice deep and measured. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." Adriana took the chair directly across from him. Her father sat beside her, his presence a silent wall of support. A waiter appeared from nowhere, poured water, vanished again. "I've been told," Leonardo began, "that you're considering terminating the pregnancy." "That's right." "May I ask why?" The question was so absurd that Adriana almost laughed. "Because I didn't choose this. Because I didn't consent to any of this. Because my entire life has been hijacked by someone else's mistake, and I'm not interested in spending the next year and the next 18 years after that dealing with the consequences." Leonardo listened without interruption, his expression giving away nothing. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "I understand your anger," he said. "If I were in your position, I'd be furious as well. This situation is unprecedented, unwanted, and deeply violating. You're right to feel that way." "But," Adriana prompted, because there was always a but. "But that child is mine as well. Genetically, biologically, legally. It's my child. And while I understand this isn't what you wanted, it's not what I wanted either. I didn't consent to this situation any more than you did. The difference is that now the situation exists and we have to decide how to proceed. I've already decided." "Have you?" Leonardo leaned forward slightly. "Because from where I sit, you're making a permanent decision based on temporary emotions. Anger, fear, a sense of lost control. Those are valid feelings, but they're not a foundation for this kind of choice." "Don't presume to tell me what I'm feeling. I'm not. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that there might be other options. Options that respect your autonomy while acknowledging the reality of what's happened." "Like what?" Adriana demanded. "Joint custody with a man I've never met? Raising a child with ties to organized crime? Spending my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if every stranger is a threat or an ally?" "Like a partnership," Leonardo said quietly. "A real one. Not coerced, not forced, but chosen by both of us." "You mean marriage?" "I mean whatever arrangement makes sense for both of us and for the child. If that's marriage, fine. If it's something else, we'll figure it out. But I'm not asking you to sacrifice your dreams or your independence. I'm asking for a chance to prove that this situation, as fucked up as it is, doesn't have to destroy your life. It could actually enhance it." Adriana stared at him, trying to find the angle, the manipulation, the hidden trap. But Leonardo's expression remained open, almost vulnerable. "Why do you care?" she asked. "You could have any woman in New York. You could have biological children the normal way, with someone you actually chose. Why does this particular child matter so much?" Leonardo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight she hadn't expected. "Because I'm 31 years old, and I've spent my entire life being told I'll never be enough. Never ruthless enough, never cold enough, never properly committed to the family business. My father measures worth in power and profit, and by his standards, I'm a disappointment." He paused. "But a child, an heir, that's something he can't dismiss or diminish. That's proof of legacy, of continuation. It's the one thing that might finally earn me the respect I've spent 3 decades chasing." The honesty was unexpected, almost painful. Adriana felt something shift inside her, a crack in the wall of anger she'd built. "And what do I get out of this partnership?" she asked. "Besides money, which you've already offered through your lawyer." "Freedom," Leonardo said simply. "Real freedom. The clinic you want to open? I'll fund it completely. No loans, no investors who want control, no compromises. Your dream, built exactly as you envision it. The career you want to build? You build it, with every resource I can provide. The independence you're afraid of losing? You keep it. I'm not interested in controlling you, Adriana. I'm interested in building something with you. Why should I believe you? Because I'm giving you the power to destroy everything I'm offering." Leonardo reached into his jacket and pulled out a document, slid it across the table. "This is a contract drafted by my attorneys. It gives you full legal custody of the child, with me having visitation rights that you control. It establishes a trust fund worth $50 million that you manage. It guarantees funding for your clinic with no strings attached. And it includes a clause that if, at any point, I violate the terms or attempt to manipulate or control you, you get everything and I get nothing. Adriana stared at the document. This can't be legal. It's completely legal. And it's binding. Sign it, and you have all the power in this arrangement. I become your partner only insofar as you allow it. What's the catch? No catch. Just one request. Leonardo's eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw genuine emotion there. Give me 6 months. 6 months to prove that this can work. 6 months to show you that I'm not the monster you think I am. And if, at the end of those 6 months, you want nothing to do with me, you walk away with everything this contract promises, and I'll never contact you again. Adriana looked at her father. Victor's expression was carefully neutral, but his slight nod gave permission. She looked back at Leonardo, the stranger who was somehow tied to her in the most intimate way possible. He was offering her everything she wanted: freedom, resources, control. But the price was trust, and trust was something she'd never given easily. 6 months, she finally said. But we do this my way. I'm not moving into some compound. I'm not changing my life to fit yours. You want to be involved? You accommodate me. Agreed. And the first sign, the very first sign that you're trying to manipulate or control me, I'm gone. No second chances. Understood. Adriana picked up the pen that Leonardo offered, hesitated for just a moment, then signed the contract. As her signature dried on the page, she felt the entire trajectory of her life shift into unknown territory. She was still angry, still terrified, still uncertain about everything. But for the first time since seeing those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, she felt like she might actually survive this. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The contract sat on Adriana's kitchen table for 3 days before she actually read it thoroughly. Every clause, every provision, every carefully worded guarantee that promised her the autonomy she'd demanded. Leonardo's attorneys had drafted it exactly as he'd described. She maintained full custody, controlled all major decisions, and had complete financial independence. On paper, it was everything she'd asked for. In reality, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, uncertain whether the ground below was solid or just cleverly disguised air. Her father arrived on the 4th morning with coffee and bagels, letting himself in with the key she kept telling herself she should take back. You've read it, Victor said, sitting across from her. It wasn't a question. 20 times. And? Adriana traced the rim of her coffee cup, watching the steam rise and dissipate. It's too good. Nobody gives away this much power without expecting something in return. Maybe he's telling the truth. Maybe he genuinely wants to make this work. You don't believe that any more than I do. She looked up at her father. You know what he is, what his family does. People like that don't suddenly develop consciences because of an accident. Victor was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. I've known the Morettis for a long time, done business with them, competed with them, occasionally worked alongside them. Leonardo is different from his father. Antonio Moretti is old school, ruthless, traditional, believes power comes from fear. But Leonardo? He paused. Leonardo understands that the world is changing, that the old ways won't sustain the empire his grandfather built. He's trying to evolve the family business into something more legitimate, more sustainable. His father fights him on it constantly. So what? That makes him noble? No, it makes him pragmatic. And right now, pragmatism is better than nobility. A pragmatic man will honor his agreements because it serves his interests. A noble man might break them for what he believes is the greater good. Adriana absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. He wants an heir to prove himself to his father. Yes. And I'm just the inconvenient vessel that happened to end up carrying that heir. You're more than that, and you know it. Victor reached across the table, covered her hand with his. You're carrying leverage, real leverage. And that contract ensures the leverage stays in your hands. Use it. Before Adriana could respond, her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I'd like to take you to dinner tonight, somewhere you choose. Just the 2 of us. No lawyers, no contracts, no negotiations, just a conversation. Leonardo. She showed the message to her father. He moves fast, Victor observed. Should I go? Do you want to? Adriana considered the question honestly. Part of her wanted to refuse, to maintain distance, to keep Leonardo Moretti firmly in the category of necessary evil rather than actual human being. But another part, the The part that had always been too curious for her own good wanted to understand him, to see if the vulnerability he'd shown at Il Sole was real or just another layer of manipulation. "I think I have to," she finally said. "Then go." "But Adriana?" Victor's expression hardened. "Keep your guard up. Leonardo might be different from his father, but he's still a Moretti. They didn't build their empire through kindness." She texted back a single word. "Where?" The response came immediately. "Your choice. Name it." Adriana thought for a moment, then typed, "Gramercy Tavern, 8 o'clock. Perfect. I'll make the reservation." That evening, Adriana stood in front of her closet for 20 minutes, trying to decide what to wear to dinner with the father of her accidental child. Too formal felt like she was trying too hard. Too casual felt disrespectful. She finally settled on dark jeans, a silk blouse, and the leather jacket she'd bought herself as a graduation present, armor that didn't look like armor. The restaurant was busy when she arrived, the typical Thursday night crowd of couples and business dinners filling the warm, wood-paneled space. Leonardo was already there, seated at a corner table that somehow managed to feel private despite the surrounding activity. He stood when he saw her approaching. "You're early," she said. "So are you." They sat, and for a moment neither spoke. A waiter appeared, poured water, recited specials, then vanished. The silence stretched. "This is incredibly awkward," Adriana finally said. Leonardo's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "Monumentally. I've been rehearsing conversation starters for the last hour and discarded every single one." "What were the options?" "How are you feeling?" seemed patronizing. "Tell me about yourself" felt like a bad first date. "So, about this child we're having together was too direct. I settled on hoping you'd start talking first." Despite herself, Adriana almost laughed. "Coward." "Pragmatist, there's a difference." He paused. "How are you feeling? And yes, I know it's patronizing, but I genuinely want to know." "Nauseous, exhausted, terrified, angry, sometimes all at once." She met his eyes. "But you didn't ask me here to discuss pregnancy symptoms." "No. I asked you here because we're about to spend the next 6 months, possibly longer, in each other's lives, and I know absolutely nothing about you except what's in the background report my security team compiled." Adriana felt ice slide down her spine. "You had me investigated?" "Of course. You had me investigated too. Your father's people are very thorough, by the way. They got access to my financial records from 3 different offshore accounts, which is actually impressive." She hadn't known about that, but she kept her expression neutral. "So what did your report say?" "Adriana Marie Vale, 23. Only child. Mother died when you were 16. Cancer. Father is Victor Vale, who officially runs an import-export business and unofficially brokers deals between various interested parties who prefer not to meet directly. You graduated top of your class from Cornell's veterinary program. You want to open a clinic focused on exotic animal care because you spent 6 months volunteering at a wildlife rehabilitation center in Costa Rica and realized that most vets don't know how to treat anything beyond dogs and cats." He paused. "You're fluent in Spanish. You hate cilantro. You run 5 miles every morning when you're stressed. And you've been single for 8 months after ending a 2-year relationship with someone named Marcus, who worked in finance and apparently never understood why you'd choose veterinary medicine over something more lucrative." Adriana's hands tightened around her water glass. Hearing her life reduced to bullet points felt violating, even though she'd expected it. "Anything else?" "You're terrified of becoming like your father. Not because you don't love him, but because you see how the business has consumed him, how it's cost him relationships and peace, and any chance at a normal life. You chose veterinary medicine specifically because it's as far from his world as you could get while still doing something meaningful." Leonardo's voice softened. "And right now, you're afraid that this pregnancy has pulled you right back into exactly the kind of life you've spent years trying to avoid." The accuracy of the assessment stole her breath. "You got all that from a background report." "No, I got the facts from the report. The rest I got from watching you at Il Sol. The way you held yourself, the things you demanded in the contract. The fact that you insisted on meeting here instead of somewhere I suggested." He leaned forward slightly. "You're fighting for control because control is the only thing standing between you and the life you're afraid of. I understand that. Better than you might think." "Do you?" "My father has been grooming me to take over the family business since I was 8 years old. Every decision I've made, every relationship I've had, every ambition I've pursued, he's been there, adjusting, manipulating, steering me toward the future he wants. And for years I let him because I thought earning his approval was the same as earning my own worth. Leonardo's expression darkened. It took me until my late 20s to realize that his version of success would destroy everything I actually value. By then, I was so deep in the business that getting out wasn't an option. So I've spent the last 3 years trying to change it from the inside, trying to build something that doesn't require blood and fear to sustain itself. And how's that working out? Slowly. My father fights me at every turn. The old guard thinks I'm weak, soft, too concerned with legitimacy, and not enough with profit. They're probably right. He paused. But then this happened. This impossible, accidental, completely insane situation. And suddenly I have leverage I never had before. An heir gives me credibility with the traditional faction. It proves I'm committed to legacy. And it gives me the foundation to finally push through the changes I've been fighting for. Adriana studied him, trying to reconcile the vulnerability in his words with the reputation that preceded him. So I'm useful to you. Yes, completely. Just like I'm useful to you. Leonardo didn't flinch from the bluntness. I'm not going to pretend this is something it's not. We didn't choose each other. We're not in love. We're two people trapped in an impossible situation, trying to make the best of it. But that doesn't mean we can't build something real out of it, something that benefits both of us. The waiter returned and they ordered without really looking at the menu. Adriana chose the first thing that didn't make her feel nauseous. Leonardo ordered something equally arbitrary. When they were alone again, Adriana asked the question that had been burning in her mind since Il Sole. What happens if this doesn't work? If we spend 6 months trying and realize we can't stand each other? Then you walk away with everything the contract promises, and I become a weekend father who sends child support checks and shows up for birthdays. It's not what I want, but it's better than nothing. Leonardo's honesty was almost painful. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. Why not? Because we're both fighters. We both refuse to accept the limitations other people try to place on us. We both want something better than what we were born into. He met her eyes. And because I saw the way you looked at that ultrasound when my lawyer showed you the initial medical reports, you're already attached to this child, even if you don't want to admit it. Adriana's throat tightened. She had looked at that ultrasound, a tiny blur of cells that somehow represented a future she hadn't planned. And she had felt something. Not love, not yet, but a fierce protective instinct that terrified her. I'm not ready to be a mother, she whispered. Nobody is. Not really. But you'll figure it out. We both will. Their food arrived, and the conversation shifted to safer topics. Books, travel, the restaurant's wine list that Adriana couldn't touch for the next 7 months. Leonardo was well-read, sharp, and surprisingly funny when he let his guard down. He'd spent 2 years studying architecture in Milan before his father had demanded he return to New York and focus on the family business. He spoke 3 languages fluently and was learning Mandarin because he believed the future of global business ran through Beijing. What about you? He asked. The exotic animal clinic. What made you choose that specifically? Adriana told him about Costa Rica, about the 3-toed sloth that had been hit by a car and needed surgery, about how she'd watched the local vet work with limited equipment and infinite patience to save an animal most people would have written off as a loss. There's something about helping creatures that can't advocate for themselves, she said. They're vulnerable in a way that requires absolute commitment from the people caring for them. No cutting corners, no half measures. You're either all in or you're useless. That's how you approach everything, isn't it? What do you mean? All in or useless? No middle ground. It's why you're so angry about this situation, because you can't be all in on something you didn't choose, but you're also incapable of being useless. So you're trapped between 2 impossibilities. The observation hit closer than Adriana wanted to acknowledge. You think you have me figured out after 1 dinner and a background report? No. I think I'm starting to understand you. There's a difference. Leonardo signaled for the check. Can I drive you home? I can take the subway. I know you can. I'm asking if you'll let me drive you anyway. Adriana considered refusing, maintaining the independence she'd fought for. But the subway at 10 o'clock on a Thursday meant crowded platforms and suspicious looks at her still flat stomach. And suddenly she was too tired to care about the symbolism of accepting his offer. Fine. His car was parked 2 blocks away, a black Mercedes that probably cost more than most people's yearly salary. The driver, a quiet man in his 50s, held the door open. Leonardo slid in beside her. The drive to Brooklyn was quiet. Adriana watched the city slide past her window, Manhattan giving way to the Williamsburg Bridge, the glittering skyline receding behind them. Leonardo made no attempt at conversation, seeming content to let the silence exist without forcing it into something else. When they pulled up to her building, he walked her to the door despite her protests. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Not for dinner, just something. A walk. Coffee, whatever you're comfortable with." "Why?" "Because 6 months is a long time, and I'd like to spend it getting to know you rather than just coexisting." Adriana wanted to say no, wanted to maintain boundaries, keep him at a safe distance, protect herself from whatever complications might come from letting Leonardo Moretti into her life beyond the legal and financial arrangements. But there was something in his expression, genuine hope mixed with careful restraint, that made her hesitate. "There's a farmer's market in Prospect Park on Sunday mornings," she heard herself say. "I usually go around 10. I'll meet you there." He left without trying to kiss her, without any of the gestures that might have crossed the line from partnership into something more complicated. Adriana watched his car disappear into the Brooklyn night, then went upstairs to her apartment, where she lay awake for hours trying to understand why she felt disappointed rather than relieved. Sunday morning arrived cold and bright. Adriana almost texted Leonardo to cancel 3 separate times, but something stopped her each time: pride, curiosity, or maybe just the stubborn refusal to let fear make her decisions. He was waiting at the park entrance at exactly 10 o'clock, wearing jeans and a sweater that made him look less like a billionaire crime boss and more like a graduate student. The transformation was jarring. "You're staring," he said. "You look different." "I left the threatening aura at home. Thought it might scare the organic vegetable vendors." They walked through the market, past stalls selling fresh bread and local honey and vegetables that cost 3 times what the grocery store charged. Leonardo bought a bouquet of fall flowers without asking if she wanted them, just handed them to her with a slight smile. "Bribery?" she asked. "Hopeful gesture. There's a difference." They found a bench overlooking the meadow, where families played with dogs and couples took impossibly aesthetic photographs for social media. Adriana held the flowers in her lap, breathing in the scent of chrysanthemums and autumn. "Tell me about your mother," Leonardo said quietly. The request caught her off guard. "Why?" "Because she's important to you. Because she shaped who you are. Because I want to know the person you're becoming the mother version of." Adriana was quiet for a long moment, memories rising like ghosts. She was a pianist, taught at Juilliard. She had this way of making everything feel magical, even ordinary things. Sunday pancakes became grand performances. Grocery shopping became adventures. She saw beauty in everything. The words came slowly, each one a small excavation of old grief. When she got sick, she refused to let it change her. Even at the end, even when the pain was unbearable, she'd make jokes, tell stories. She died playing music in her mind because she was too weak to actually touch the piano. "You were 16? 16 and furious. Furious at the cancer, at my father for not being able to fix it, at her for leaving, at myself for not being able to save her. I threw myself into school, into achievement, into anything that would let me feel like I had control over something." Adriana looked at Leonardo. "Does that sound familiar?" Painfully. He was quiet for a moment. "My mother is still alive, but she might as well be a ghost. She learned early that showing emotion in the Moretti family is weakness. So she became this perfect, cold, untouchable thing. The ideal mafia wife, beautiful, silent, obedient. I don't think I've had a real conversation with her since I was 12. "That's worse," Adriana said softly. "At least I got 16 years of authentic love. You've had a lifetime of someone physically present but emotionally absent. Well, maybe that's why this terrifies me so much. I have no model for how to be a good parent, no template for what healthy family looks like." "Neither do I. My mother was perfect until she wasn't there anymore. My father is brilliant and protective, and so deep in his world that normal family dinners are briefings on which families are at war and which politicians are currently in someone's pocket." She touched her still flat stomach unconsciously. "We're both going into this completely unprepared. Then we'll figure it out together. Make our own template." "You make it sound easy." "I don't think it'll be easy at all. I think it'll be the hardest thing either of us has ever done. But I also think we're both stubborn enough to make it work anyway." A family walked past, mother, father, 2 kids chasing each other with the unselfconscious joy of childhood. Adriana watched them, trying to imagine herself in that picture. It felt impossible and inevitable at the same time. I have my first real prenatal appointment on Wednesday, she said. At Mount Sinai, 2 o'clock. Leonardo's expression shifted, hope and gratitude and careful restraint. May I come? If you want. I do. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the park move around them. Adriana felt something settling inside her, a tentative acceptance of the reality she couldn't change. This was happening. She was pregnant with Leonardo Moretti's child. And maybe, just maybe, that didn't have to be the disaster she'd been certain it would be. I need to tell my best friend, she said suddenly. Carmen. She's going to lose her mind when she finds out. Will she hate me? Probably. She's very protective. I look forward to earning her approval then. Adriana almost smiled. She doesn't give approval easily. Neither do you. If I can navigate you, I can handle your best friend. That's extremely presumptuous. Is it working? This time, Adriana did smile. Maybe. They left the park an hour later, Leonardo walking her back to her apartment building. This time, when they reached her door, he didn't ask to see her again. He just said, Wednesday, 2 o'clock. I'll meet you there. You could just text me the day of. I could, but then I wouldn't get to see the look on your face when you realize I'm actually showing up. He left before she could respond, and Adriana went upstairs feeling something she hadn't expected, anticipation instead of dread. Wednesday arrived faster than she'd expected. Adriana took the subway to Mount Sinai, arriving 15 minutes early because being late to medical appointments made her irrationally anxious. Leonardo was already in the waiting room, dressed in a suit that suggested he'd come directly from business. He stood when he saw her. You're early, she said. I didn't want to risk being late. They checked in together, and the receptionist's eyes widened slightly when she saw Leonardo's name on the form. Recognition, maybe, or just awareness that whoever this man was, he carried weight. They sat in adjacent chairs, surrounded by other expectant couples who all seemed much more prepared for parenthood than Adriana felt. Nervous? Leonardo asked quietly. Terrified. You? Same. You're good at hiding it. Years of practice. My father believes showing fear is worse than showing weakness. I learned to bury both very deep. Before Adriana could respond, a nurse called her name. They followed her down a hallway to an examination room that smelled like antiseptic and possibility. The ultrasound machine stood in the corner like a piece of alien technology. Dr. Sarah Kim entered a few minutes later, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and an efficient manner. Ms. Vale, Mr. Moretti, I understand this is your first appointment together? Yes, Adriana said. Well, let's see how everything is progressing. Dr. Kim set up the ultrasound, explaining the process with the casual competence of someone who'd done this thousands of times. The gel was cold against Adriana's skin. The wand pressed against her abdomen. Then the screen flickered to life. Adriana had seen the earlier ultrasound images and the medical reports Leonardo's lawyers had provided, but seeing it live, watching the tiny flutter that was a heartbeat, hearing the rapid rhythm fill the room, that was different. That was real in a way that made everything else fall away. There, Dr. Kim said, pointing to a small shape on the screen. That's your baby. About 10 weeks along now. Heartbeat looks strong. Development is right on track. Adriana couldn't speak. Couldn't look away from the screen. That tiny, impossible thing was growing inside her. Part of her. Part of Leonardo. Part of something she still didn't understand but couldn't deny. She felt Leonardo's hand find hers, his fingers intertwining with hers. She didn't pull away. Everything looks good, Dr. Kim continued. We'll do some blood work, check your levels, but so far, this is a very healthy pregnancy. The appointment continued. Questions about symptoms, diet, stress levels. Adriana answered mechanically, her mind still fixed on that flickering heartbeat. Leonardo asked questions she hadn't thought of, about risks, about precautions, about what she should avoid. He took notes on his phone like he was preparing for a business meeting. When they finally left the hospital an hour later, Adriana felt hollowed out and filled up at the same time. They stood on the sidewalk, the afternoon sun filtering through the buildings, casting long shadows across the pavement. That was real, she said quietly. Yes. I mean, I knew it was real, intellectually, but seeing it changed everything, Leonardo finished. I know. They stood in silence for a moment, both processing what they'd witnessed. Then Leonardo spoke, his voice careful. I know we agreed to take this slow, to spend 6 months figuring out if this can work. But I need you to know something. Adriana looked at him. I'm all in, he said. Whatever happens between us, whatever we become or don't become, I'm completely committed to that child, to being the kind of father I never had, to building something better than what I was given. His eyes met hers. I'm not going anywhere. The declaration should have felt like pressure, should have triggered her instinct to push back, to maintain distance, to protect herself from promises that might not hold. But instead, it felt like relief, like finally standing on solid ground after weeks of free fall. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Well, Leonardo smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face, making him look younger, more hopeful, more human. Do you have to get back to work, or can I buy you lunch? I should work on the clinic proposal. The zoning board meets next week, and I need to have all my documentation perfect. I could help. I've navigated more zoning boards than I can count. Adriana hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but I'm buying my own lunch. Deal. They found a deli 3 blocks from the hospital, ordered sandwiches that Adriana could actually stomach, and spread her clinic proposal across a corner table. Leonardo read through it with the focused intensity she was beginning to recognize as his default mode, occasionally making notes or asking questions that showed he actually understood the complexities of veterinary medicine licensing. This is good, he said finally. Really good. The financial projections are conservative but realistic. The location makes sense. The market research is thorough. But the zoning board is going to push back on the exotic animal designation. They'll worry about noise, safety, liability. You need to preempt those concerns with specific protocols and insurance guarantees. He was right. Adriana had known the zoning was her weak point, but she'd hoped her thoroughness in other areas would compensate. How do I do that? I'll introduce you to my attorney who specializes in commercial real estate. She's brilliant at this, and I'll make some calls to ensure the board members understand that this clinic would be an asset to the neighborhood, not a liability. That sounds like you're using your influence to manipulate the outcome. Yes. Is that a problem? Adriana wanted to say yes, wanted to maintain her independence, prove she could do this without his help. But she was also pragmatic enough to know that refusing assistance out of pride was stupid. As long as it's legal, completely legal, just strategically applied pressure. Leonardo's smile was slightly wicked. Welcome to how business actually gets done. They spent the next 2 hours refining her proposal, Leonardo making calls to various people who apparently owed him favors, Adriana taking notes and trying not to feel overwhelmed by how quickly things were moving. By the time they finished, she had meetings scheduled with 3 different city officials and a zoning attorney who normally had a 6-month waiting list. This is too much, Adriana said as they left the deli. This is how I show up for people I care about. The casual declaration stopped her in her tracks. You care about me? Of course I do. You're carrying my child. You're intelligent, driven, and stubborn enough to keep me honest. Why wouldn't I care about you? We barely know each other. Then we'll fix that. Dinner Friday? Somewhere you choose again. Adriana should have said no, should have maintained boundaries, kept their relationship strictly about the child and the business arrangements. But she heard herself saying, there's an Italian place in Carroll Gardens, small, quiet, best pasta in Brooklyn. Perfect. I'll pick you up at 7. He left, and Adriana stood on the sidewalk, watching him disappear into the flow of pedestrians, wondering when she'd stop thinking of Leonardo Moretti as the enemy and started thinking of him as something much more dangerous, a partner she might actually come to trust. Friday evening found Adriana standing in front of her mirror for the 3rd time, second-guessing her outfit choice. The emerald dress felt too formal, the jeans too casual, and everything in between seemed to send messages she wasn't sure she wanted to convey. She finally settled on black pants and a deep burgundy sweater that her mother had given her years ago, back when life made sense and pregnancy happened to people who planned for it. Her phone buzzed. Leonardo, right on time. Downstairs whenever you're ready. No rush. She grabbed her coat and headed down, finding him leaning against his car, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when the building door opened, and something in his expression softened when he saw her. You look beautiful, he said simply. You don't have to say that. I know. That's why I did. He opened the car door for her. This Italian place in Carroll Gardens, does it have a name, or do I just drive until you tell me to stop? Piccola Cucina, corner of Henry and Union. The drive was quiet, comfortable in a way that surprised her. The city lights blurred past the windows, and Adriana found herself studying Leonardo's profile in the passing glow. The strong jawline, the slight tension around his eyes that suggested he carried more weight than he ever showed. "What?" he asked, catching her staring. "Just trying to reconcile who you are with what you're supposed to be." "And what am I supposed to be?" "Dangerous. Ruthless. The kind of man who makes problems disappear." She paused. "But you bought me flowers at a farmer's market and took notes during a prenatal appointment like you were preparing for a final exam." "People are complicated. I can be both things." He glanced at her. "Does that scare you?" "Sometimes. Other times it makes me think you're the only person who might actually understand how exhausting it is to live in two worlds at once." They arrived at the restaurant, a tiny place with maybe 12 tables and walls covered in photos of someone's Italian grandmother. The owner, Marco, greeted Adriana with the familiarity of a regular customer and eyed Leonardo with the protective scrutiny of a man who'd seen too many smooth-talking strangers break too many hearts. "This is Leonardo," Adriana said. "Be nice, Marco." "I'm always nice to people who deserve it." Marco's eyes narrowed. "You deserve it?" "I'm trying to," Leonardo replied evenly. Marco grunted, apparently satisfied, and led them to a corner table. The menu was handwritten, the wine list limited to bottles Marco personally approved of, and the entire atmosphere radiated the kind of authenticity that couldn't be manufactured. "How did you find this place?" Leonardo asked after they'd ordered. "My mother used to bring me here when I was little, before she got sick. Marco's grandmother taught her how to make proper carbonara." Adriana smiled at the memory. "After she died, I couldn't come back for years. Then one day I was walking past and Marco was standing outside and he looked at me and said, 'Your mother would want you to eat.' So I came in and I've been coming back ever since." He remembers her. "He says she had the kind of smile that made you believe in joy even when you had no reason to. I think he's right." Their food arrived, simple pasta dishes that tasted like someone's grandmother had poured love and butter into every bite. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of quiet that didn't need filling. "Can I ask you something?" Leonardo said eventually. "And you can tell me if it's too personal." "You can ask. I might not answer." "What would your mother think about all this? About me? About the situation? About the choices you're making?" Adriana set down her fork, considering the question seriously. "I think she'd be furious about how it happened, about the violation, the lack of choice, the way powerful people created this situation through carelessness. But I also think—" She paused, searching for the right words. "I think she'd tell me that life gives us what it gives us, and the measure of a person is what they build from it." She believed in transformation, in taking the broken things and making them beautiful. Am I one of the broken things in this scenario? We both are. The question is whether we're capable of building something beautiful anyway. Leonardo was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face. "I want to tell you something. Something I haven't told anyone else." "Okay." My father called me into his office the day after he found out about the pregnancy. I expected rage, accusations, maybe even violence. Instead, he looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Respect. Leonardo's voice tightened. He said, "Finally, you've done something worthy of the Moretti name. 31 years of my life, everything I'd accomplished, every sacrifice I'd made for the family business, and the only thing that earned his approval was a child I didn't even plan." That must have felt horrible. It felt like vindication and failure at the same time, like I'd finally won a game I never wanted to play. He met her eyes. And it made me realize that if I let this child become just another piece in my father's empire, I'll have failed in the only way that actually matters. I'll have perpetuated exactly the cycle I've spent years trying to break. Adriana reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. The gesture was instinctive, unbidden, and she saw surprise flicker across Leonardo's face before something warmer replaced it. "Then we don't let that happen," she said. "We build something different, something that doesn't require our child to earn love through achievement or sacrifice who they are to meet someone else's expectations." "You say we like you've already decided to keep me around." "I say we because I watched you take notes during a prenatal appointment and ask questions about foods I should avoid and whether stress levels could affect fetal development. I say we because you're showing up consistently even when it would be easier not to." She squeezed his hand. I'm not saying I trust you completely. I'm not saying this is going to be easy. But I am saying that maybe, possibly, you're not the worst person to be accidentally tied to for the next 18 years. Leonardo laughed, a real laugh that transformed his entire face. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Your standards are concerningly low. Occupational hazard of growing up in a family where affection is a weapon and vulnerability is suicide. They finished dinner as the restaurant slowly emptied around them. Marco brought them espresso they hadn't ordered and biscotti his grandmother had made that morning, waving away Leonardo's attempt to pay with a gruff, "Friends of Adriana eat for free." "I don't think that's sustainable business practice," Leonardo murmured. Marco doesn't care about sustainable business practice. He cares about people. Adriana dunked her biscotti in the espresso. It's refreshing, actually, being around someone who measures worth in something other than profit margins and strategic advantage. Is that a dig at me? It's an observation about the worlds we both come from. My father treats relationships like transactions. Your father treats family like assets. Neither of them would understand a man who runs a restaurant at a loss because he'd rather feed people who matter than maximize revenue. Leonardo was quiet, absorbing this. I want to be more like Marco. Then start practicing. It's easier than you'd think. They left the restaurant near midnight, stepping into the cold November air. Leonardo's driver was waiting, but Leonardo waved him off. Let's walk for a bit, if that's okay with you. Adriana nodded, and they walked through Carroll Gardens, past brownstones with warm lights glowing in windows, past couples walking dogs and teenagers smoking cigarettes they thought their parents didn't know about. The neighborhood felt alive in a way Manhattan never did. Real people living real lives unconnected to empires and legacies and the weight of inherited power. Can I ask you something now? Adriana said. Fair trade. What do you actually do? I know the official story, real estate development, investment portfolios, legitimate business, but what do you actually spend your days doing? Leonardo was quiet for several steps. Honestly, lately I spend most of my time trying to untangle the legitimate business from the illegitimate business my father and grandfather built the empire on. It's like trying to separate water from wine after they've been mixed for 60 years. Every property we own has some connection to something questionable. Every business partner has ties to someone we shouldn't be associated with. Every dollar in our accounts has passed through so many hands that tracing it back to something clean is nearly impossible. So what do? I build new things, clean things, real estate developments that are actually just real estate developments, investment funds that follow actual regulations, partnerships with people who won't require favors that compromise everything. He paused. My father thinks I'm wasting time and resources on legitimacy theater. He's probably right that it's not profitable in the short term. But in 20 years, when the old guard is gone and the world has changed, the Moretti family will still be standing because we evolved instead of clinging to the old ways. That's actually noble. It's actually self-preservation. The FBI has been building cases against families like ours for decades. Eventually, they'll get enough evidence to take us down unless we've already transformed into something they can't touch. Leonardo's expression hardened. I'm not trying to be a good person, Adriana. I'm trying to be a smart one. Those aren't mutually exclusive. In my family, they usually are. They walked in silence for a while longer, and Adriana felt something shifting between them. A tentative understanding maybe, or just the recognition that they were both trying to escape gravitational pulls that had shaped their entire lives. When they finally reached her building, Leonardo walked her to the door but made no move to come inside. Thank you for tonight, he said, for trusting me enough to share that place, those memories. Thank you for actually listening instead of just waiting for your turn to talk. It's rarer than you'd think. Can I see you tomorrow? There's something I want to show you. What is it? A surprise. Nothing dangerous, nothing that requires formal clothes or uncomfortable shoes, just something I think you'd appreciate. Adriana studied his face, looking for manipulation or hidden agendas. She found only genuine hope and carefully restrained excitement. What time? 10? I'll pick you up. Fine, but if this surprise involves meeting your family or attending some society function, I'm jumping out of a moving car. Noted. No family, no society functions, no moving car escapes required. He left, and Adriana went upstairs, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Her phone buzzed as she was getting ready for bed. Carmen, her best friend, who'd been on a work trip to London for the past month and was completely unaware of the catastrophe that had become Adriana's life. Back in town tomorrow. Brunch? I need to hear everything I've missed. Adriana stared at the message, reality crashing back. She'd been avoiding telling Carmen because putting it into words made it real in a way that even the ultrasound hadn't. But she couldn't keep hiding it. Brunch sounds perfect. Fair warning, I have news that's going to make you want to throw things. Intriguing. I'll bring mimosas. I can't drink. There was a long pause, then 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before Carmen's response came through. Adriana Marie Vale. What the hell have you been doing while I was gone? It's complicated. It's always complicated with you. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., our usual place, and you better start at the beginning. Adriana fell asleep trying to figure out how to explain the inexplicable, how to make sense of a situation that defied all rational understanding. Saturday morning arrived too quickly. Leonardo picked her up at exactly 10, driving this time without his usual driver, and they headed north out of the city. Adriana watched Brooklyn give way to Queens, then the Bronx, then suburban Westchester. Are you kidnapping me? She asked. Because that would be very on brand for the situation we're in. Not kidnapping, temporary relocation for purposes of revelation. Leonardo's eyes crinkled with amusement. Trust me. Those are famously the last words before something goes terribly wrong. Then I promise if this goes terribly wrong, you can say, I told you so for the rest of our lives. They pulled off the highway near a town Adriana didn't recognize, following increasingly rural roads, until they reached a property surrounded by high fences and discreet security cameras. Leonardo punched in a code and the gates opened. Okay, now I'm actually concerned about the kidnapping scenario, Adriana said. Just wait. They drove down a long driveway lined with oak trees, and then the building came into view. A sprawling facility that looked part barn, part veterinary clinic, part sanctuary. Animals moved in large enclosures, horses, llamas, something that might have been a miniature donkey. Leonardo parked and turned to her. This is the Westchester Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. They take in injured and orphaned animals, rehabilitate them, and either release them back to the wild or provide permanent sanctuary if they can't survive on their own. They specialize in exotic species that most facilities won't touch. Adriana stared at the building, recognition dawning. I know this place. I tried to intern here during veterinary school, but they had a 2-year waiting list. I know. I called in some favors. The director is expecting us. They got out of the car, and a woman in her 60s with weathered hands and kind eyes came out to greet them. You must be Adriana. I'm Dr. Patricia Morrison. Leonardo tells me you're interested in exotic animal medicine. Interested is an understatement, Adriana said, shaking her hand. I've read all your research on avian rehabilitation protocols. The paper you published on treating fractured wings in raptors changed how I approach bird cases. Doctor. Morrison's face lit up. You've actually read my work? Most people just nod politely when I start talking about birds. She gestured toward the facility. Come on, let me show you around. The next 2 hours were magic. Dr. Morrison walked them through the facility, introducing them to a barn owl recovering from a car collision, a red-tailed hawk with a healed wing learning to fly again, a family of raccoons being prepared for release. There were foxes and opossums, and even a young black bear that had been orphaned when her mother was killed by poachers. Adriana asked 1,000 questions, took notes on her phone, discussed treatment protocols and rehabilitation timelines with the kind of passionate intensity that made her forget everything else. Leonardo stayed quiet, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. In the avian recovery room, doctor, Morrison handed Adriana a small falcon that was being treated for a fungal infection. The bird was light as air, its heart beating rapid fire against Adriana's palm. She's beautiful, Adriana whispered. She's a fighter. Came in nearly dead 2 weeks ago. Now look at her. Dr. Morrison smiled. Reminds me of why I do this work. Every animal that survives is a small miracle. When they finally left the facility 3 hours later, Adriana felt like she'd been given a glimpse of exactly the life she wanted to build. Leonardo drove in silence for a while, letting her process. That was incredible, she finally said. How did you even know about that place? I did my research. You want to open an exotic animal clinic. I wanted to show you what's possible when you have the resources and the commitment, doctor. Morrison started that facility 20 years ago with a small grant in a barn she renovated herself. Now she treats animals that would die anywhere else. Why did you really take me there? Leonardo glanced at her, then back at the road. Because I wanted you to see that the dream you have isn't just possible, it's necessary. And because I wanted you to know that when I say I'll support your clinic, I don't mean writing a check and disappearing. I mean actually supporting it, connecting you with people like Dr. Morrison, helping you build something that matters. Adriana felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. You can't just do things like this. You can't just show up and be perfect and make me want to believe this could actually work. Why not? Because I'm trying very hard to maintain appropriate boundaries and protect myself from getting hurt, and you're making that extremely difficult. Leonardo pulled the car over to the side of the road, put it in park, and turned to face her. Then stop trying so hard. Stop protecting yourself from something that might actually be good. Stop treating this like a transaction that needs boundaries and regulations and safety measures. And what should I treat it like? Like a partnership between two people who are both terrified and both trying to build something better than what they were given. He reached over, took her hand. I know this started as an accident. I know we didn't choose this, but we're choosing what happens next. And I'm choosing to show up consistently, honestly, without reservations. The question is whether you're brave enough to do the same. Adriana looked at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers, the solid reality of his presence. Everything in her wanted to pull away, maintain distance, keep the walls firmly in place. But another part, the part that had held that falcon and felt its heartbeat and remembered what it was like to believe in miracles, that part wanted something different. I'm terrified, she whispered. Me too. What if this doesn't work? What if we try and fail and end up making everything worse? Then we fail together, and we figure out how to coexist for the sake of our child. But at least we'll know we tried. Leonardo's thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. I'd rather risk failure than live with the certainty of never knowing what we could have been. Adriana closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there was water below. Okay, she said. Okay, we try. Really try. No holding back, no safety measures, no exit strategies prepared in advance. We build this together and see what happens. Leonardo's smile was brilliant, transformative. Yeah? Yeah, but I still have brunch with Carmen tomorrow, and I still need to tell her everything, and she's probably going to want to murder you, so don't get too comfortable with the happiness. I can handle protective best friends. I grew up in a world where everyone is constantly trying to kill each other. One woman with justifiable concerns about her best friend's welfare is nothing. They drove back to the city in companionable silence, and when Leonardo dropped her off, he kissed her cheek, a brief, chaste gesture that somehow felt more intimate than anything else that had passed between them. See you soon, he said. Probably sooner than you'd like once Carmen gets through with you. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of bright, cold sunshine that made New York feel clean and full of possibility. Adriana met Carmen at their usual brunch spot in the West Village. A tiny cafe that served overpriced eggs and mediocre coffee, but had the kind of atmosphere that made conversation feel important. Carmen was already there, looking effortlessly elegant in a way that made Adriana feel perpetually underdressed. She stood when Adriana approached, pulled her into a tight hug, then held her at arm's length. You look different, Carmen said immediately. Something's changed. Can I sit down before you start the interrogation? Absolutely not. Spill. They sat, ordered food neither of them would finish, and Adriana took a deep breath. I'm pregnant. Carmen's eyes went wide, then wider. I'm sorry, what? Pregnant. About 10 weeks. But you haven't been dating anyone. You've been in a self-imposed celibacy phase for nearly a year because, and I quote, men are exhausting and my vibrator doesn't try to explain my own field to me. I know. So either you've had the world's most forgettable one-night stand or something really weird happened. Carmen's expression shifted to concern. Adriana, what happened? Adriana told her everything. The clinic, the mistake, the revelation, the contract, Leonardo, the tentative partnership they were building. She watched Carmen's face cycle through shock, horror, fury, and something that might have been reluctant understanding. When she finished, Carmen was quiet for a long moment. So you're having a baby with Leonardo Moretti, the Leonardo Moretti, because a fertility clinic couldn't be bothered to check a name twice. That's the situation, yes. And instead of terminating or suing everyone involved into oblivion, you've decided to build a partnership with this man. Yes. Have you lost your mind? Possibly, probably. I don't know anymore. Adriana's hands tightened around her coffee cup. But Carmen, you didn't see him at the ultrasound appointment. You didn't hear him talk about trying to break cycles and build something different. He's not what I expected. He's a Moretti. They're not good people, Adriana. Neither is my father, by most people's standards. But he loves me. He's protected me. He's given me every opportunity to build a life separate from his world. She paused. Leonardo is trying to do the same thing. Trying to separate legitimate from illegitimate. Trying to build something that won't require his child to become someone they're not. Carmen studied her friend's face, seeing something there she recognized. Determination mixed with hope. The same look Adriana had worn when she'd announced she was going to veterinary school instead of joining her father's business. "You're falling for him," Carmen said quietly. "What? No, that's not... We barely know each other." "You barely knew Marcus for months before you started dating him, and you never looked at him the way you just looked when you were talking about Leonardo taking notes at your prenatal appointment." Adriana wanted to deny it, to insist that what she felt was purely pragmatic, purely about making the best of an impossible situation. But Carmen knew her too well, could see through defenses that had taken years to build. "I don't know what I'm feeling," she finally admitted. "It's too complicated, too new, too bound up in fear and obligation and the absolute insanity of this situation. But yes, there's something there, something that terrifies me because it's real and vulnerable and could destroy me if I let it." "Then be careful, please. I know you're capable of handling yourself, but this isn't just about you anymore. There's a child involved and powerful families and consequences that go way beyond normal relationship drama." "I know. But also, and I can't believe I'm saying this, maybe give him a real chance. Maybe this accident could actually turn into something good." Carmen reached across the table, squeezed Adriana's hand. "Just promise me you'll be smart about it. Keep your eyes open. Don't let love make you blind to red flags." "I promise. And introduce me to him. I need to evaluate whether he's worthy of my best friend. He's terrified of you already, and you haven't even met." "Good. Fear is a healthy foundation for respect." They finished brunch, and Adriana felt lighter for having shared the truth. Carmen walked her home, extracted promises of weekly updates, and made Adriana swear to call immediately if anything felt wrong or unsafe. When Adriana finally got back to her apartment, she found a package waiting at her door. No return address, just her name written in elegant script. Inside was a first edition of a veterinary textbook on exotic animal medicine she'd mentioned wanting months ago in a casual conversation she'd forgotten having, and a note in Leonardo's handwriting for building the dream. Adriana held the book, feeling the weight of it, the significance of someone actually listening when she spoke. And she realized that somewhere between the anger and fear and tentative hope, she'd stopped thinking of Leonardo as the enemy and started thinking of him as something much more dangerous, a partner she might actually be falling for. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm that surprised Adriana with its naturalness. Leonardo showed up for every prenatal appointment, asked questions that demonstrated he'd been reading pregnancy books in his spare time, and somehow managed to have ginger tea waiting for her whenever morning sickness struck at inconvenient moments. He helped her navigate the zoning board meetings with a combination of legal expertise and strategic pressure that got her clinic permits approved in record time. He introduced her to contractors who didn't inflate their estimates, and architects who actually listened to what she wanted instead of imposing their vision. And somewhere in the process of building her dream, Adriana realized she was also building something else entirely. A relationship that felt nothing like the careful strategic partnership they'd initially negotiated. It was late January when everything shifted from tentative hope to something much more complicated. Adriana was 18 weeks pregnant, her body finally showing the unmistakable curve that made strangers smile at her on the subway. She'd spent the day at the clinic site, watching workers frame out the examination rooms that would eventually house her equipment, and she was exhausted in the bone-deep way that came from both physical pregnancy and emotional overwhelm. Leonardo picked her up at 6, as he'd taken to doing most evenings, and immediately noticed something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked as she slid into the car. "Nothing. Just tired." "Adriana." His voice carried that particular tone that said he knew she was lying and was giving her one chance to tell the truth before he pushed. She sighed, leaning her head back against the seat. "My father called. He wants to meet with both of us. Tomorrow. Says it's important." "About what?" He wouldn't say over the phone, just that there are some things we need to discuss before the baby comes, before our families become more permanently entangled. Leonardo was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. Are you worried? My father doesn't call meetings unless there's a problem, and problems in his world tend to involve violence or betrayal or both. We'll handle it together, whatever it is. They drove to Adriana's apartment, but when Leonardo started to leave, she found herself reaching for his hand. Stay, please. I don't want to be alone tonight. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, hope, careful restraint. Are you sure? No, but I'm asking anyway. He stayed. They ordered Thai food that Adriana could barely eat, watched a movie neither of them paid attention to, and eventually ended up on her couch in the kind of comfortable silence that spoke of intimacy earned rather than forced. Leonardo's hand rested on her stomach, feeling the small movements that had started a week ago, tiny flutters that still amazed her every time. I felt that, he said quietly. Was that the baby? Yes. Adriana covered his hand with hers. Dr. Kim says it'll get stronger over the next few weeks. Eventually, you'll be able to see the movements from outside. That's incredible. His voice held wonder, vulnerability, everything he usually kept carefully hidden. I can't believe there's a person in there, a whole person we made, completely by accident. Technically, a fertility clinic made. We were just the unwitting genetic donors. Still ours, though, still a miracle, however it happened. Adriana turned to face him, studying the planes of his face in the dim light from the television. Are you scared? About becoming a father? Terrified. I have no idea what I'm doing. My own father's parenting style involved emotional manipulation, impossible standards, and teaching me that love is something you earn through achievement. I don't want to be that person. He paused. But I also don't know how to be anything else. What if I mess this up? What if I damage our child the way my father damaged me? Then we'll figure it out together. We'll make mistakes, probably lots of them, but at least we'll be making them while trying to do better. That has to count for something. Leonardo's hand moved from her stomach to her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw with a gentleness that made her breath catch. When did you become the optimist in this relationship? I'm not an optimist. I'm just tired of being afraid all the time. Tired of protecting myself from something that might actually be good. And is this good? What we're building? Adriana considered the question honestly. They were partners in parenthood, allies in navigating impossible family dynamics, friends who talked late into the night about dreams and fears and the weight of inherited expectations. But they were also something more, something neither had named or acknowledged, something that felt too fragile to examine too closely. I think it could be, she whispered. If we let it. Leonardo leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm against her lips. Can I kiss you? Yes. He kissed her softly, carefully, like she was something precious that might break if he pressed too hard. Adriana felt something crack open inside her. All the walls she'd built, all the protection she'd maintained, all the fear she'd used as armor. She kissed him back, her hands finding the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Leonardo's eyes searched her face. Are you okay? I don't know. Ask me tomorrow, after I've had time to panic about what this means. It means whatever we want it to mean. No more, no less. That's terrifyingly vague. Good. I like keeping you on your toes. He kissed her forehead, then stood. I should go. Let you get some sleep before tomorrow. You could stay, not for anything except sleep. Just stay. Leonardo looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. They fell asleep on her couch, tangled together in a way that should have been uncomfortable but somehow felt exactly right. When Adriana woke in the early morning darkness, she found Leonardo already awake, watching her with an expression that made her heart stutter. How long have you been staring at me like a creep? She murmured. Only 20 minutes. 30, tops. That's actually concerning. I was trying to memorize this, in case I never get it again. Why wouldn't you get it again? Because good things don't tend to last in my life. They get taken away or destroyed or revealed to be illusions. His voice was quiet, honest in the way that only darkness allowed. But you're real. This is real. And I'm terrified of losing it. Adriana reached up, traced the line of worry between his eyebrows. Then stop waiting for it to end and just be here, right now, with me. I'm trying. Try harder. They met with Victor Vale at noon in a restaurant in Tribeca that looked like any other upscale lunch spot, but was actually owned by one of his business associates and regularly swept for listening devices. Victor was already there, seated at a corner table with clear sightlines to all entrances, flanked by the same two silent men who seemed to be permanent fixtures. He stood when Adriana and Leonardo approached, kissed his daughter's cheek, and shook Leonardo's hand with the kind of grip that conveyed both respect and warning. "Thank you for coming," Victor said as they sat. "I know this is unusual, but circumstances require directness." "What circumstances?" Adriana asked, feeling dread settle in her stomach. Victor pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. Leonardo opened it, his expression darkening as he read. Adriana leaned over to see. Photographs, documents, what looked like surveillance reports. "What is this?" Leonardo's voice had gone cold, dangerous. Evidence that the Castellano family knows about the pregnancy, about the clinic mistake, about the child Adriana is carrying. Victor's expression was grim. "Marco Castellano is furious. His daughter was supposed to carry the Moretti heir as part of a business arrangement between your families. Now that arrangement is void, and he's looking for compensation." "What kind of compensation?" Adriana felt ice slide through her veins. "The kind that involves eliminating the problem, meaning you." Victor's eyes met his daughter's. "There's a contract out, not official, not public, but real enough. Castellano wants you gone, wants the child gone, wants everything to go back to the original plan." Leonardo's hands clenched into fists on the table. "When did you find out about this?" 3 days ago. I've been working to verify the intelligence, confirm the threat is real, and assess our options." Victor's expression softened slightly when he looked at Adriana. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear." "What are our options?" Adriana forced her voice to stay steady, refusing to let fear make her weak. Option 1. Leonardo arranges a meeting with Castellano, negotiates compensation, and hopes he accepts money instead of blood. Option 2. You disappear. I have contacts who can relocate you, give you a new identity, keep you safe until after the baby is born. Option 3. There is no option 3, Leonardo interrupted. She's not disappearing. She's not running. And I'm not negotiating with a man who put a contract on the mother of my child. Then what do you suggest? Victor's tone suggested he already knew the answer and didn't like it. I handle Castellano, permanently. That would start a war. A real one. Your family against his, with mine caught in the middle. Casualties would be significant. Then casualties will be significant. I'm not sacrificing Adriana or our child because some entitled asshole can't accept that his plans didn't work out. Adriana watched the two men face off across the table, both alpha predators calculating angles and advantages. She felt the baby move inside her, a small flutter that reminded her what was actually at stake. "Stop," she said quietly. Both men looked at her. "Just stop. You're both talking about this like I'm a chess piece to be moved around instead of a person with agency. I'm not disappearing, I'm not hiding, and I'm definitely not letting either of you start a war over me." "Adriana, this is serious," her father started. "I know it's serious. Someone wants to kill me and my child. That's extremely serious. But responding to violence with more violence just perpetuates exactly the kind of world I don't want to raise this baby in." "What do you suggest?" Leonardo asked, his voice tight. "I suggest we actually negotiate, not with threats or posturing or violence, but with the truth. The clinic made a mistake. Nobody chose this situation. But now it exists, and we're all going to have to live with it. Castellano's daughter can still have children with genetic material from whoever she wants. She's not actually harmed by this situation except in terms of wounded pride and disrupted plans." "You're being naive," Victor said gently. "Men like Castellano don't accept logic and reason when their pride has been damaged." "Then we make it worth his while to accept it anyway. Leonardo, your family has resources, connections, power. Offer Castellano something valuable enough that accepting it looks smart instead of weak. Make it a business decision instead of a vendetta." Leonardo was quiet for a moment, his eyes calculating. "The waterfront development in Red Hook. Castellano's been trying to get a piece of that project for years. My father keeps blocking him because he doesn't want Castellano expanding into Brooklyn. So offer it to him. Give him something he wants more than revenge. My father will never approve that." "Then don't ask for approval. You said you're trying to transform the family business, make it more legitimate. This is how you do it, by choosing negotiation over violence, by proving that the next generation operates differently." Adriana reached across the table, took Leonardo's hand. And if your father pushes back, remind him that the child I'm carrying is the Moretti heir, that protecting me protects his legacy. Use the leverage you have. Victor watched this exchange with something like admiration on his face. She's got your father's strategic mind and her mother's ability to find solutions nobody else sees. Dangerous combination. Can you set up the meeting? Leonardo asked Victor. With Castellano? Yes. He'll agree to sit down, if only to evaluate whether killing you both at the same table is more efficient than the original contract. Then set it up, tomorrow if possible. The longer this hangs over us, the more likely someone makes a move we can't counter. The meeting was scheduled for the following evening at a neutral location, a private dining room at a hotel in Midtown that had been used for decades to broker deals between families who couldn't afford to be seen together publicly. Adriana insisted on attending despite both Leonardo and her father's objections. This is about me, she said flatly. I'm not sitting home waiting while men decide my fate. They arrived at 7, Adriana flanked by Leonardo and her father, with enough security in the shadows to start a small war if negotiations failed. Marco Castellano was already there, a man in his 60s with cold eyes and the kind of stillness that suggested violence was always just beneath the surface. His daughter Adriana sat beside him, looking nothing like the woman from the photograph. She was beautiful in a carved, perfect way that suggested expensive maintenance and deep unhappiness. Thank you for meeting with us, Leonardo said, taking his seat across from Castellano. I'm here out of courtesy to your father, not to you, but I'll listen. Castellano's voice was rough, Brooklyn accented despite decades of wealth. You have 10 minutes to convince me why I shouldn't proceed with my original plan. Because killing Adriana and our child doesn't actually solve your problem. It just creates new ones. The clinic's mistake will still exist. The scandal will still be public. And you'll have started a war with my family that will cost you resources, territory, and possibly your life. That sounds like a threat. It's an observation. Wars are expensive, unpredictable, and rarely end the way anyone plans. Leonardo leaned forward. But I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to offer you something better than revenge, something that actually advances your interests instead of just satisfying your wounded pride. Castellano's eyes narrowed. I'm listening. Leonardo laid out the proposal, full partnership in the Red Hook development, with profit sharing that would be worth hundreds of millions over the next decade. Access to Moretti political connections that could smooth the way for Castellano's legitimate business expansion. And a public statement that the clinic mistake was unfortunate but handled amicably between two families who chose cooperation over conflict. Why would your father agree to this? Castellano asked. Antonio Moretti doesn't share power or profit without extracting something significant in return. My father wants an heir, a legitimate heir who will carry on the family legacy. That child is growing inside Adriana right now. Protecting her protects his future. He'll accept this deal because refusing it means risking the one thing he values more than territory or pride. Castellano studied Leonardo for a long moment, then shifted his gaze to Adriana. You're very quiet, Miss Val. Don't you have anything to say? Adriana met his eyes, refusing to show the fear churning in her stomach. I'm sorry your daughter's plans were disrupted by the clinic's mistake. I'm sorry you feel wronged by circumstances none of us controlled. But I'm not sorry I'm alive, and I'm not sorry I'm carrying this child. If you choose violence, you'll be killing an innocent woman and an innocent baby because you can't accept that sometimes life doesn't go according to plan. That's not strength. That's just cruelty dressed up as principle. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the security guards seemed to hold their breath. Then Castellano laughed, a harsh, sharp sound that held no humor. You have your father's backbone, I'll give you that. He looked at his daughter. What do you think? The younger Adriana spoke for the first time, her voice soft but clear. I think the clinic made a mistake that hurt everyone involved. I think holding on to anger about it doesn't serve any purpose. And I think if Mr. Moretti is offering something valuable to make amends, we should accept it and move forward. Her father's expression shifted. Surprise, then calculation, then something that might have been respect. Very diplomatic. He turned back to Leonardo. I want the Red Hook deal in writing. Full partnership, equal profit sharing, no hidden clauses that limit my involvement. And I want a public statement from both the Moretti and Vale families acknowledging that this situation was handled through negotiation and mutual respect. Done, Leonardo said immediately. Then we have an agreement. The contract is void. Your woman and your child are safe. Castellano stood, buttoning his jacket. But understand this. The next time there's a conflict between our families, there won't be negotiation. There will only be consequences. Understood. They left the hotel separately, security protocols maintained even in peace. Adriana didn't speak until they were in Leonardo's car, heading back to Brooklyn, the city lights blurring past the windows. That was insane, she finally said. We could have died in there. But we didn't. We negotiated, just like you suggested. We chose a different path. Leonardo's hand found hers, squeezed tight. You were incredible. The way you looked at Castellano, the way you spoke. You weren't afraid. I was terrified. I'm still terrified. My hands are shaking. Mine too. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. But we survived. Together. When they reached her apartment, Leonardo walked her upstairs, and this time when she asked him to stay, there was no hesitation. They fell into bed together, exhaustion and relief, and something deeper tangling together. Leonardo held her like she was precious, like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to something real. And Adriana let herself be held, let herself accept that she wasn't alone in this anymore. I think I'm falling in love with you, he whispered into the darkness. I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. I know we started this as a business arrangement. But somewhere between the prenatal appointments and the farmers' markets, and you standing up to a man who wanted you dead, I fell for you, completely. Adriana's throat tightened with emotion she couldn't name. That's terrifying. I know, but it's also true, and I needed you to know in case... She kissed him, cutting off whatever catastrophic thinking he was about to spiral into. Don't plan for disaster. Just be here, with me, now. They made love slowly, carefully, Leonardo treating her like she was something miraculous. And when it was over, when they lay tangled together in her too small bed, Adriana felt something settle deep in her chest. Acceptance, maybe. Or just the surrender that came from finally stopping the fight against something inevitable. I'm falling too, she whispered. I don't know what that means or where it leads, but I'm falling, and I'm choosing not to catch myself this time. Then we fall together. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in months, Adriana slept without nightmares, without fear, without the weight of the world pressing down on her chest. The next morning brought complications in the form of Leonardo's father. Antonio Moretti called at 6 a.m., demanding Leonardo come to the estate immediately. The tone suggested it wasn't a request. I have to go, Leonardo said, already getting dressed. He knows about the Castellano deal, probably has spies at the hotel who reported back. Will he be angry? Furious, but also pragmatic. He wants the heir, and he knows protecting you is the only way to ensure that happens. Leonardo kissed her forehead. I'll be back this afternoon. Call me if you need anything. He left, and Adriana spent the morning at the clinic site, watching the construction progress, trying to focus on something concrete and real instead of worrying about what was happening in Westchester. Leonardo returned at 3, looking exhausted but somehow lighter. How did it go? Adriana asked. Better than expected. He raged for 20 minutes about undermining his authority and making deals without approval. Then he read the contract terms, calculated the profit margins, and realized I'd actually negotiated something advantageous. He's still angry, but he approved it. Leonardo pulled her close. He wants to meet you. Officially. The whole family does. That sounds ominous. It will be uncomfortable and probably awful, but it's necessary. They need to see that you're real, that the baby is real, that this isn't just some abstract concept. He paused. Will you do it? Come to dinner at the estate this weekend? Adriana thought about refusing, about maintaining boundaries, about protecting herself from whatever judgment or manipulation waited at the Moretti family estate. But she also knew Leonardo was right. This was necessary, unavoidable. Fine. But you owe me at least 3 dinners at Marco's after this to make up for whatever nightmare your family puts me through. Deal. Saturday evening arrived too quickly. Leonardo picked her up at 6, driving north into Westchester as the sun set behind them. The Moretti estate sat on 50 acres of carefully manicured grounds, the main house a sprawling Mediterranean-style villa that had been in the family for 3 generations. This is obscene, Adriana murmured as they drove up the long driveway. Wait until you see the inside. My mother redecorated 5 years ago. It's like a museum dedicated to wealth and emotional repression. The front door opened before they reached it, and a man in his 60s stepped out, tall, silver-haired, with Leonardo's dark eyes and an expression of absolute authority. Antonio Moretti. Behind him stood a woman who must have been Leonardo's mother, beautiful in that frozen, ageless way that suggested excellent plastic surgery and deep unhappiness. Father, mother, this is Adriana Vale. Leonardo's hand rested protectively on her lower back. Miss Vale. Antonio's voice was measured, evaluating. Welcome to our home. The dinner that followed was exactly as uncomfortable as Adriana had anticipated. The dining room could have seated 30, but they gathered at one end of a table that felt designed to emphasize distance. Antonio asked pointed questions about her family, her education, her plans for the clinic. Leonardo's mother said almost nothing, just smiled with frozen politeness and moved food around her plate. Then Antonio leaned back in his chair, wine glass in hand, and spoke the words Adriana had been dreading. My son tells me you've negotiated peace with the Castellano family, that you were instrumental in reaching an agreement. I suggested negotiation over violence. Leonardo did the actual work. Don't be modest. Leonardo explained your role quite clearly. Antonio's expression was unreadable. You have strategic instincts, the ability to see solutions that others miss. That's valuable. Rare, even. Thank you. It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. He set down his glass. You're carrying the Moretti air. That makes you family, whether you intended it or not. And in this family, everyone serves a purpose. Everyone contributes. I'm not interested in contributing to your business empire, Adriana said flatly. I'm building my own career, raising my own child, living my own life. And yet you'll be tied to this family for the rest of your life through that child. You'll benefit from our resources, our protection, our name. It seems reasonable that you should offer something in return. Father, Leonardo started, I'm not suggesting she become an active participant in business operations. I'm simply noting that her particular talents could be useful in specific situations, negotiations that require a softer touch, conflicts that need diplomatic resolution rather than force. Antonio's eyes never left Adriana's face. Think about it, Miss Vale. You could build your clinic and live independently while occasionally lending your strategic mind to family matters. Everyone benefits. Adriana felt the trap closing around her, exactly the kind of entanglement she'd spent her life trying to avoid. But she also saw the calculation in Antonio's eyes, the way he was testing her, measuring whether she'd bend or break. I'll consider it, she said carefully. But my clinic comes first, my career comes first, and any involvement in family business happens on my terms, with my full consent or not at all. Antonio smiled, a sharp, approving expression. You'll do well in this family, Miss Vale. Welcome. The rest of the dinner passed in tense conversation about neutral topics, and when they finally left 3 hours later, Adriana felt like she'd survived an interrogation disguised as hospitality. I'm sorry, Leonardo said as they drove back to the city. I should have warned you he'd try to recruit you. It's fine. I handled it. She looked at him. Is this what you meant about transforming the family, using strategy instead of violence? Yes. My father is old school, but he's not stupid. He sees the value in evolution, even if he doesn't fully trust it. You impressed him. That's not easy. I don't want to impress him. I just want to build my clinic and raise our child without constantly navigating power dynamics and family politics. I know, and I'll do everything I can to make that possible. Leonardo reached for her hand. But my father was right about one thing. You are tied to this family now. Not because of obligation or debt, but because you're carrying the future. That comes with protection, resources, and yes, occasional requests. But I promise you, I'll never let them pull you into anything you don't choose. Adriana leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settle over her. 2 months ago, she'd been a normal woman with normal dreams. Now, she was negotiating with mafia families, carrying a child she never planned, and falling in love with a man who lived in a world she'd spent her life trying to avoid. This is insane, she whispered. Completely. But it's ours. We built it together. Do you think we can actually make this work? Long term? I think we don't have a choice. We're in this now, together, for better or worse. And honestly, he kissed the top of her head. I wouldn't want to be in it with anyone else. Adriana closed her eyes, letting herself believe it, that this impossible, accidental situation could actually become something beautiful. That love could grow in the space between chaos and hope. That two broken people could build something whole. And as the city lights welcomed them home, she chose to believe that maybe, just maybe, they already had. The months that followed brought a kind of peace Adriana had never expected to find. Her clinic took shape with remarkable speed. Leonardo's connections cutting through bureaucratic red tape that would have stalled most projects for years. By March, the examination rooms were fully equipped. The surgical suite gleamed with state-of-the-art technology, and the rehabilitation enclosures in the back had been designed with input from Dr. Morrison herself. Adriana was 32 weeks pregnant, moving slowly but determinedly through the final preparations for opening day. Leonardo had effectively moved into her apartment without either of them acknowledging it. His clothes appeared in her closet, his books on her shelves, his presence woven so thoroughly into her daily life that she couldn't remember what it felt like before him. They fell asleep tangled together every night, his hand resting on her belly, feeling their son move and kick with increasing vigor. Because it was a son. They'd found out at the 20-week ultrasound, Leonardo's face transforming with wonder and terror in equal measure when Dr. Kim had pointed out the unmistakable evidence on the screen. "A boy," he'd whispered. "We're having a boy." "Does that change anything?" Adriana had asked, watching his reaction carefully. "Everything. Nothing. I don't know." He'd looked at her, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I just want him to be happy, to feel loved, to never doubt his worth the way I've doubted mine." They'd started arguing about names immediately, a running debate that continued for weeks. Leonardo favored traditional Italian names that honored family heritage. Adriana wanted something that felt fresh, unburdened by expectation. They finally compromised on Luca Gabriel. Luca for Leonardo's grandfather, who'd emigrated from Sicily with nothing and built an empire through determination and strategic brilliance. Gabriel because Adriana's mother had loved the name and called it the sound of hope made into language. It was early April when the complications began. Adriana woke at 3 in the morning with pain lancing through her abdomen, sharp and wrong. She tried to breathe through it, telling herself it was just Braxton Hicks contractions, just her body preparing for labor that was still weeks away. But the pain intensified, and when she shifted position, her hand came away wet. "Leonardo!" Her voice came out strangled, frightened. "Leonardo, wake up!" He was alert immediately, the kind of instant awareness that came from years of living in danger. "What's wrong?" "Something's wrong. I'm bleeding." The drive to Mount Sinai was a blur of city lights and Leonardo's controlled panic, his hand gripping hers while he navigated traffic with the kind of reckless precision that suggested he'd done this before in different, darker circumstances. He called ahead, and by the time they arrived, Dr. Kim was waiting with a team of nurses and the kind of efficient urgency that made Adriana's fear spike higher. They rushed her to labor and delivery, monitors attached within seconds, doctor. Kim's face grave as she examined the readings. "Your placenta is partially abrupting," Dr. Kim said, her voice calm but serious. "It's separating from the uterine wall prematurely. We need to deliver the baby now." "But I'm only 32 weeks, Adriana managed through the pain. "It's too early." "The baby is in distress. His heart rate is dropping. If we don't deliver within the next 30 minutes, we could lose him." Dr. Kim met her eyes. "I need you to trust me, Adriana. We do this now, or we risk losing everything." "Do it," Leonardo said, his voice steady despite the terror in his eyes. "Whatever you need to do, just save them both." The next 30 minutes were chaos. Surgical prep, anesthesia, Leonardo's hand gripping hers while nurses moved with practiced efficiency. Adriana felt the pressure of the incision, the strange pulling sensation as they worked to extract the baby, and then suddenly, impossibly, the sound she'd been waiting 8 months to hear, a cry. Thin, reedy, but unmistakably alive. "It's a boy," Dr. Kim announced, though they'd known this for months. "He's small, but he's breathing. The NICU team is here." Adriana caught only a glimpse, a tiny, red-faced creature covered in Wernicke's impossibly small hands curled into fists before they whisked him away to the NICU. Leonardo's face was wet with tears he wasn't bothering to hide. "He's alive," he whispered. "He's actually alive. Go with him," Adriana said, exhaustion pulling at her. "Don't leave him alone. Go." Leonardo hesitated, torn between her and their son, then kissed her forehead. I'll be back. I promise. The hours that followed blurred together. Surgery to repair the damage from the abruption, recovery in a room that felt too quiet without the baby she'd carried for 8 months, visitors who spoke in hushed tones about complications and prognosis, and statistics that meant nothing except fear dressed up as information. Leonardo returned after 2 hours, his face drawn but cautiously hopeful. He's in an incubator, 4 pounds, 3 ounces. They say his lungs are underdeveloped, so he's on oxygen support. But he's fighting, doctor. Chen says his vitals are stable. Can I see him? Soon. They want you to recover from surgery first, but I took pictures. He showed her his phone, images of the tiniest human being she'd ever seen, tubes and wires surrounding him, but unmistakably hers, theirs. He has your nose, and my stubborn refusal to give up. Adriana felt tears slide down her face, emotion overwhelming everything else. I was so scared. When I woke up bleeding, I thought, I know, me too. Leonardo climbed carefully into the hospital bed beside her, holding her like she was something precious that had almost been taken away. But he's here. He made it. We all made it. Her father arrived at dawn, bringing coffee Leonardo couldn't drink, and flowers Adriana was too exhausted to appreciate. He stood at the foot of her bed, looking older than she'd ever seen him, and spoke words she'd never heard him say before. I was terrified, Victor admitted. When Leonardo called to say you were bleeding, that they might lose you both, I felt more afraid than I've felt in 40 years of living in a world where death is always close. You're my daughter, my only child. The thought of losing you... His voice broke, and he turned away, composing himself with visible effort. I'm okay, Dad. We're both okay. You're not okay. You're recovering from emergency surgery with a premature baby fighting for his life in the NICU. But you're alive, and that's all that matters. He looked at Leonardo. Thank you. For getting her here in time, for staying with her. I wasn't going to be anywhere else, Leonardo said quietly. They let Adriana see Luca 6 hours later, wheeling her down to the NICU in a wheelchair because she was still too weak to walk. The NICU was a strange, hushed place where machines beeped and hummed and tiny babies fought battles too big for their fragile bodies. Luca's incubator was in the corner, monitors tracking every breath, every heartbeat. You can touch him through the ports, the nurse explained, showing Adriana how to reach inside without disturbing the wires. Talk to him. He knows your voice. Adriana slid her hand through the opening, her finger finding Luca's impossibly small palm. He gripped it instinctively, and something in her chest cracked open, fierce maternal love mixed with terror and wonder, and the absolute certainty that she would burn the world down to protect this tiny person. Hi, baby, she whispered. I'm your mom. I know this isn't how we planned to meet, and I know you're having a rough start, but you're doing so well. You're so strong, just like your dad. Tears blurred her vision. We love you so much already, more than you'll ever understand. Just keep fighting, okay? Keep breathing. We're right here, and we're not going anywhere. Leonardo's hand found her shoulder, squeezed gently. When she looked up, his face was wet with tears, his expression raw with everything he usually kept hidden. I never knew, he said softly. I never knew it was possible to feel this much, to love something this completely when you've only known it existed for a few seconds. That's what parenthood is, the NICU nurse said kindly, checking Luca's monitors. Instant, overwhelming, terrifying love. Gets easier and harder at the same time. They stayed for an hour, taking turns touching Luca, talking to him, learning the rhythms of his breathing and the patterns of his heartbeat on the monitors. When they finally returned to Adriana's recovery room, they found Carmen waiting, her face streaked with tears. I came as soon as I heard. How is he? How are you? Alive. Scared. Hopeful. Adriana let Carmen hug her carefully, mindful of the surgical incision. He's so small, Carmen. So fragile. But he's here. He made it. That's what matters. Carmen pulled back, studied her friend's face. You look like hell, by the way. Emergency surgery will do that. I brought you decent coffee and actual food because hospital food is criminal. Also, your father's security team is terrifying. They tried to stop me at the elevator until I showed them our photo from college where you're wearing that ridiculous hat. Despite everything, Adriana laughed. The purple fedora. I'd forgotten about that. I never let you forget anything embarrassing. It's part of the best friend contract. Carmen's expression sobered. Seriously, though, are you okay? Not just physically, actually okay. Adriana considered the question honestly. She'd just survived emergency surgery, her premature son was fighting for his life in the NICU, and her entire world had been transformed in ways she was still processing. But Leonardo sat beside her, solid and present and completely committed. Her father had shown vulnerability she'd never seen before. Her best friend was here, offering support without judgment, and somewhere down the hall, Luca was breathing, fighting, surviving. I think I am, she said quietly. Or I will be. Eventually. The days that followed settled into a rhythm dictated by NICU, visiting hours, and recovery protocols. Adriana's surgical incision healed slowly, the physical pain manageable, but the emotional toll of being separated from Luca nearly unbearable. Leonardo practically lived at the hospital, splitting time between Adriana's room and the NICU, learning to change impossibly tiny diapers and hold his son while managing tubes and wires with the focused intensity he brought to everything. Antonio Moretti visited once, standing at Luca's incubator with an expression Adriana couldn't read. He's small, Antonio said finally, but Morettis are fighters. He'll survive. He's not just a Moretti, Adriana said quietly from her wheelchair. He's also a Vale, and a person who gets to decide who he becomes, regardless of what either family expects. Antonio looked at her, something that might have been respect flickering in his eyes. You're more like my son than I initially realized. Stubborn, idealistic, convinced you can change things through force of will alone. He paused. I hope you're right, for Luca's sake. It was the closest thing to approval Adriana had ever gotten from him, and she took it for what it was. Acknowledgement that she wasn't going anywhere, that she'd earned her place in the family through sheer determination and refusal to be intimidated. Luca spent 3 weeks in the NICU, his tiny lungs growing stronger, his weight slowly increasing. Adriana was discharged after 5 days, but returned every morning to spend hours beside his incubator, reading him stories, singing lullabies her mother had sung to her, telling him about the clinic that was waiting for him, about the life they were building. Leonardo was there constantly, learning the medical terminology, asking questions that demonstrated he'd been researching premature infant development, advocating fiercely whenever he thought Luca's care could be improved. The NICU nurses grew fond of him, this intense, wealthy man who stood beside his son's incubator for hours, talking about everything and nothing, sharing dreams and promises and apologies for the complicated world Luca was being born into. You don't have to apologize for who you are, one of the nurses told him gently. He won't care about your family or your past. He'll just care that you showed up, that you loved him. That's all any child really needs. On day 18, Dr. Chen announced that Luca was ready to try breathing without oxygen support. They removed the tubes, and Adriana held her breath, watching the monitors, terrified that his numbers would crash. But Luca breathed on his own, his tiny chest rising and falling with determined effort, his oxygen saturation holding steady. He's doing it, Leonardo whispered, gripping Adriana's hand so tightly it hurt. He's actually doing it. He's a fighter, Dr. Chen said, smiling, just like his parents. 3 days later, they were told Luca could go home. The news felt surreal, impossible, like being told they'd won a lottery they hadn't entered. The nurses taught them how to monitor his breathing, how to recognize signs of distress, how to care for a preemie who was still fragile but growing stronger every day. The drive home was the most terrifying 20 minutes of Adriana's life. Leonardo drove like he was transporting explosives, hyper-aware of every other car, every pothole, every possible threat. Luca slept in his car seat, oblivious to his parents' panic, looking impossibly small in the safety harness designed for much larger babies. Leonardo had transformed Adriana's apartment while she'd been focused on recovery and NICU visits. The second bedroom had become a nursery painted in soft blues and greens, filled with a crib, changing table, and more baby equipment than any single infant could possibly need. There were books on the shelves, toys waiting for when Luca was old enough to appreciate them, and photographs on the walls, Adriana's mother holding infant Adriana, Leonardo as a serious-faced child, the ultrasound images that had started everything. When did you do all this? Adriana asked, looking around in wonder. I had help. Carmen came over 3 times to approve color choices because she said my aesthetic was emotionally repressed billionaire, and babies need warmth. Your father sent over the crib. It was yours when you were a baby. He had it restored. Leonardo's voice softened. I wanted Luca to come home to something beautiful, something that showed how much he's loved. They spent that first night in shifts, taking turns watching Luca breathe, both terrified that something would go wrong the moment they stopped paying attention. But morning came, and Luca was fine, hungry and vocal about it, his cries surprisingly loud for such a small person. I think he's mad at us for the rough start, Leonardo said, walking him around the apartment while Adriana prepared a bottle. Understandable, really. If someone evicted me from my comfortable home 8 weeks early, I'd be angry too. Life with a newborn was exactly as chaotic and exhausting as everyone had warned, and nothing like Adriana had imagined. Luca demanded constant attention, waking every 2 hours to eat, needing diaper changes that seemed endless, crying for reasons they couldn't always identify. But there were also moments of perfect peace. Luca sleeping on Leonardo's chest while he worked on his laptop, managing business from home so he could be present. Adriana nursing their son in the early morning darkness, feeling him relax in her arms, his tiny hand curled around her finger. We're actually doing this, Adriana said one night, exhausted but somehow happy, watching Leonardo rock Luca back to sleep after a particularly difficult evening. We're actually parenting. Badly, probably, but together. Leonardo looked at her, his expression open, vulnerable in the way it only was in private. I love you. I know I've said it before, but I need you to know I mean it. Not because of Luca, not because of obligation or partnership, or any of the practical reasons we started this. I love you because you're brave and brilliant and you call me on my bullshit. Because you make me want to be better than I was raised to be. Because you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, even if you came into my life through the most absurd circumstances imaginable. Adriana felt tears prick her eyes, hormones and exhaustion making her more emotional than usual. I love you too. Even though you're complicated and sometimes infuriating and tied to a world I never wanted to be part of. Even though this whole thing started as a nightmare. I love you anyway. That's the most romantic declaration I've ever heard. I'm working with limited sleep and postpartum hormones. It's the best I can do. Leonardo laughed, carefully transferred sleeping Luca to his crib, and pulled Adriana into his arms. They stood in the nursery, swaying slightly, both too tired to do anything more ambitious but unwilling to let go of the moment. The clinic opened in June, 2 months later than originally planned, but more prepared than Adriana had dared to hope. The opening day brought an unexpected crowd: exotic pet owners who'd been waiting for a specialist, veterinarians from other practices who wanted to see the facility, and to Adriana's surprise, reporters who'd somehow gotten wind that the mysterious new clinic was connected to both the Vale and Moretti families. Leonardo handled the press with practiced ease, deflecting questions about family business and redirecting focus to Adriana's accomplishments, her education, her vision, the need for specialized exotic animal care. He stood beside her during the ribbon cutting, Luca strapped to his chest in a carrier, looking nothing like a crime family heir, and everything like a proud father supporting his partner's dream. This is incredible, Carmen whispered, surveying the crowd. 3 months ago you were in emergency surgery. Now you're opening your own practice with a baby who's already charming everyone he meets. You're living proof that life can transform completely in the space between disasters and miracles. It's exhausting, Adriana admitted. I have no idea how to balance being a new mother and running a business and being in a relationship with someone whose family terrifies me. You'll figure it out. You always do. That's your superpower, transforming impossible situations into something workable through sheer stubborn determination. The first patient of the day was a parrot with a respiratory infection, brought in by an elderly woman who'd owned him for 30 years. Adriana examined the bird with practiced competence, diagnosing the problem and prescribing treatment while explaining everything in terms the owner could understand. It felt right, purposeful, exactly what she'd dreamed of doing since that summer in Costa Rica. By the end of the day, she'd seen 12 patients, ranging from a hedgehog with dental issues to an iguana that had stopped eating. She was exhausted but satisfied, the kind of bone-deep tired that came from work that actually mattered. Leonardo was waiting when she finished, Luca still strapped to his chest, both of them looking slightly disheveled but content. How was it? Perfect. Chaotic and overwhelming and absolutely perfect. She kissed Luca's head, then Leonardo's cheek. Thank you. For making this possible. For believing in it even when I was too scared to believe in myself. You would have done this anyway. I just accelerated the timeline and removed some obstacles. Still, thank you. They walked home through the warm June evening, Luca sleeping peacefully while the city moved around them. People heading to dinner, tourists taking photographs, life happening in 1,000 small moments. Adriana felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness she'd been chasing for years without knowing what it looked like. Summer turned to fall, and Luca grew with alarming speed, gaining weight, hitting developmental milestones, transforming from a fragile preemie into a robust, curious baby who seemed determined to explore everything within reach. Leonardo's transformation was equally remarkable. The cold, calculating businessman softened into a father who did silly voices during story time and spent 20 minutes discussing the relative merits of different stuffed animals with their son. Antonio visited monthly, always formal, always maintaining appropriate boundaries, but there was something in the way he looked at Luca that suggested even the most hardened hearts could be touched by new life. He never interfered with Adriana's parenting choices, never pressured Leonardo to involve Luca in family business, and never mentioned the strategic value of the heir beyond that first conversation. "I think he actually respects us," Leonardo said after one particularly civil visit, in his own complicated way. "Either that or he's playing a very long game we don't understand yet. Always a possibility, but I choose to believe he's capable of change, just like the rest of us." The first year of Luca's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights, developmental milestones, and moments of pure joy that Adriana hadn't known were possible. Her clinic thrived, word spreading about the skilled veterinarian who could treat animals most practices wouldn't touch. Leonardo successfully negotiated 3 more business deals that moved the Moretti empire toward legitimacy, earning grudging respect even from the old guard who doubted his vision. But it was the small moments that mattered most. Lazy Sunday mornings in bed with Luca between them, his delighted laughter when Leonardo made faces. Evening walks through Brooklyn, Luca strapped to Adriana's chest, pointing at dogs and birds with increasing excitement. Dinners at Marco's, where Luca was treated like visiting royalty and fed tiny bites of pasta that made him squeal with happiness. On Luca's first birthday, they threw a party at the apartment that was supposed to be small, but somehow grew to include both families, Carmen and her girlfriend, half the NICU nursing staff, Dr. Kim, Dr. Morrison, and Marco, who insisted on providing all the food. The apartment was packed, chaotic, filled with laughter and competing conversations, and Luca holding court in his high chair, smeared with chocolate cake and completely delighted by the attention. Adriana stood in the doorway, watching Leonardo help Luca tear wrapping paper off presents, while Victor and Antonio stood nearby, maintaining careful civility, both grandfathers finding unexpected common ground in their mutual adoration of their grandson. Carmen appeared beside her, handed her a glass of wine. "Look at what you built." "I didn't build this. It built itself, accidentally, through a series of mistakes and impossible choices." "No. You built this. You chose to keep the pregnancy when you could have terminated. You chose to give Leonardo a chance when you could have taken the money and run. You chose to negotiate instead of accepting violence. You chose love over fear, every single time, even when fear made more sense." Carmen clinked her glass against Adriana's. "This life, this family, this beautiful chaos, it exists because you're brave enough to believe in transformation." Adriana felt tears well up, the good kind that came from overwhelming gratitude. "I was so angry when I found out I was pregnant, so certain this would destroy everything I'd worked for. And instead it gave you everything you didn't know you needed." That night, after the guests had left and Luca was asleep in his crib, Adriana and Leonardo collapsed on the couch, exhausted but happy. The apartment was a disaster of discarded wrapping paper and half-eaten cake, but neither of them had the energy to care. "We did it," Leonardo said quietly. "We survived the first year. Barely. There were moments I thought we'd never make it. But we did. Together." He pulled her close, kissed her forehead. "I have something for you. I was going to wait for a better moment, but I've learned that perfect moments are myths. They're only real moments, and you make them mean something." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Adriana's breath caught. She'd been expecting this. They'd talked about marriage in abstract terms, about making their partnership official, about giving Luca the security of parents who'd chosen each other deliberately rather than accidentally. But expectation didn't diminish the impact when Leonardo opened the box to reveal a ring that was somehow exactly right. Elegant, simple, perfect. "Adriana Vale, will you marry me? Not because of Luca, not because of family expectations, not because of any practical reason. Will you marry me because I love you more than I knew it was possible to love anyone? Because I want to spend the rest of my life building this beautiful chaos with you, because you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I want to make it official in every way that matters? Adriana looked at the ring, at Leonardo's face, at the life they'd built from accident and choice and stubborn determination. A year ago, she would have said no, would have protected herself, maintained boundaries, refused to tie herself permanently to a world she'd never wanted. But she'd learned something in the past year, that love wasn't about safety or certainty or perfect circumstances. Love was about showing up consistently through fear and chaos and all the moments that tested whether you meant it. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Leonardo slid the ring onto her finger, and they sat together in their messy apartment, holding each other while their son slept peacefully down the hall, both of them finally understanding that the accident that brought them together had actually been the greatest fortune either would ever know. They married 6 months later in a small ceremony at Marco's restaurant, surrounded by the people who actually mattered. Carmen stood as Adriana's maid of honor, making a speech that was equal parts touching and hilarious. Victor walked his daughter down the aisle with tears in his eyes, finally at peace with the life she'd chosen. Antonio stood beside his son, formally acknowledging that Leonardo had successfully transformed the family in ways he'd never believed possible. And Luca, 18 months old and already showing signs of his parents' stubborn determination, toddled between the tables, charming everyone with his enormous smile and infectious laughter. The vows they exchanged were simple, honest, stripped of pretense or performance. They promised to keep choosing each other, to keep building together, to keep transforming the broken things into something beautiful. They promised to give Luca a life where love wasn't earned through achievement, but given freely, unconditionally, without reservation. When Leonardo kissed her at the altar, Adriana felt the last walls crumble, the last fear dissolve, the last doubt vanish. This was real. This was home. This was the life she'd stumbled into accidentally and chosen deliberately, over and over, until choice and fate became indistinguishable. 2 years later, Adriana's clinic had expanded to include 2 associate veterinarians and a full support staff. She'd published research on exotic bird rehabilitation that was being cited by specialists worldwide. She still worked long hours, still got calls in the middle of the night about emergency cases, still felt the profound satisfaction that came from healing creatures that most people had written off as too difficult or too expensive to save. Leonardo had successfully moved 70% of the Moretti business into legitimate ventures, earning grudging respect from law enforcement and business partners alike. He'd proven that transformation was possible, that families built on violence could choose something different, that legacy didn't have to mean perpetuating the sins of previous generations. But it was their home life that brought the most joy. Luca was 3 now, precocious and curious and utterly convinced that the world existed to be explored. He spent mornings at preschool learning to share toys and afternoons at the clinic, where he'd appointed himself the official greeter for all animal patients. He showed no fear of exotic pets, already demonstrating the same calm confidence his mother brought to her work. They'd moved to a larger apartment in Park Slope, needed the space for Luca's growing collection of books and toys, and the second bedroom they were preparing for the sibling who would arrive in 4 months. This pregnancy had been planned, wanted, chosen with full awareness and joy. No accidents this time, just deliberate creation of the family they'd stumbled into building. On a Saturday morning in October, Adriana woke to find Leonardo already up, Luca's laughter echoing from the kitchen. She padded out to find them making pancakes, or rather, Leonardo was making pancakes while Luca enthusiastically contributed by pouring chocolate chips onto every available surface. "We're making breakfast," Luca announced proudly. "With lots of chocolate because that's the best kind." "The best kind indeed," Adriana agreed, kissing his syrup-sticky cheek. She looked at Leonardo, who was attempting to clean chocolate chips off the counter while simultaneously flipping pancakes. "Need help?" "We've got this under control, mostly, sort of." He grinned at her. "How are you feeling? How's baby doing?" "Active. I think she's training for a marathon in there. She's going to be just like you, stubborn, determined, impossible to ignore. Poor thing. Inheriting both our stubborn streaks means she'll never back down from anything." They ate breakfast together on the floor of the living room, Luca insisting on a picnic because plates and tables were boring. Adriana watched her family, this impossible constellation of people who existed because a fertility clinic had made a mistake, and felt overwhelming gratitude for every accident, every choice, every moment that had led them here. Later that afternoon, they walked through Prospect Park. Luca running ahead to collect leaves while Leonardo held Adriana's hand, his other hand resting on her growing belly. Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if the clinic hadn't made that mistake? Adriana asked. Constantly. You'd be running your clinic alone, probably dating some boring guy who didn't appreciate how brilliant you are. I'd be trapped in my father's vision of the business, probably married to someone equally miserable, both of us pretending we'd chosen the life we were living. Instead, we got this. Instead, we got everything. Leonardo stopped walking, turned to face her. I know it started as a nightmare. I know you were furious and terrified and had every right to walk away. But I'm grateful every single day that you didn't, that you gave me a chance, that you chose to build something beautiful out of chaos. It wasn't just me. We built it together. We did. And we'll keep building it, keep transforming it, keep choosing each other until the day we die. Luca ran back to them, his hands full of colorful leaves. Look! I found the prettiest ones for the baby, so she knows there are beautiful things waiting when she gets here. Adriana crouched down, helped him organize his collection. She's going to love them, and she's going to love having you as her big brother. I'm going to teach her everything. How to climb trees and find the best leaves, and how to be brave when things are scary. His expression turned serious, mimicking Leonardo's focused intensity in a way that made Adriana's heart ache with love. That's what families do, right? We help each other be brave. That's exactly what families do, Leonardo confirmed, scooping Luca up and settling him on his shoulders. We show up. We help each other. We choose love over fear, even when fear makes more sense. They walked home as the sun set, painting the Brooklyn sky in shades of orange and gold. Luca chattered about leaves and the baby and the pancakes they'd made, while Leonardo and Adriana exchanged glances that communicated everything words couldn't capture. Gratitude, love, wonder at the life they'd accidentally stumbled into and deliberately built. That night, after Luca was asleep and they were curled together on the couch, Adriana rested her head on Leonardo's shoulder and spoke the truth she'd been carrying for months. I'm happy. Genuinely, completely happy. I didn't think that was possible a few years ago. I thought happiness was something other people experienced, something I'd have to sacrifice to build the life I wanted. But this, us, Luca, the baby, the clinic, this beautiful, complicated family we've created, this is happiness. This is everything I didn't know I needed. Leonardo kissed her forehead, his hand finding hers, their fingers intertwining in the easy familiarity of people who'd chosen each other over and over. The accident that brought us together became the greatest fortune either of us will ever know. And in that moment, surrounded by the life they'd built from mistakes and miracles, Adriana knew with absolute certainty that he was right. What had started as a medical error, a nightmare, an impossible situation, had transformed into something neither of them could have planned or predicted. A partnership built on trust, a family created through choice, and a love that had grown in the space between chaos and hope. They'd taken the broken pieces and made them beautiful. They'd chosen transformation over defeat. They'd built something real from accident and intention, fear and courage, anger and love. And every single day, they chose it again.